Good evening, all. This is the Town of Ayer Zoning Board of Appeals. Wednesday, January 11th, 2023, 6 p.m. Remote participation meeting agenda. Due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022, suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, OML, public bodies otherwise governed by the OML are temporarily relieved from the requirement that meetings be held in public places, open and physically accessible to the public, so long as measures are taken to ensure public access to the body's deliberations through adequate and alternative means. This meeting will be live on Zoom. The public may participate remotely by joining Zoom, meeting ID 857-9728-7177, or by calling 312-626-6799. For additional information about remote participation, please contact Carly Antonellis, Assistant Town Manager. Oh, that's interesting.
What?
Well, it says at Espanoit. So Samantha, that's you. So we got a little bit of a mistake there. So we can get that corrected. You can contact Carly Antonellis at, was it ATM, Carly? ATM at ayer.ma.us or 978-772-8220, extension 114 prior to the meeting. 6 p.m. we'll call meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second,
All in favor signify by saying aye. State your name, please.
Jessica Gino, aye.
Mike Gibbons, aye.
You're muted, John.
Andy Philippo, aye.
Thank you, Ron. John?
John Ellis, aye.
Sam Goodwin, aye. All right. This is a continued public hearing application for a comprehensive permit, MGL, 40B, section 2023, Neighborhood of Affordable Housing, Inc., 65 Fitchburg Road, filed June 24th, 2022. Application materials can be found at ayer.ma.us/zoning-board-appeals/pages/ayer-commons-proposed-comprehensive permits-permit 40B. Wow.
We actually switched it. It's now ayer.ma.us/40B.
Thanks a lot. You made me read all that. All right.
Sorry about that.
At this point, our only purpose this evening, I think, is to go through the waivers for the comprehensive permit and discuss those. At this point, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Paul Haverty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do think I did make some additional changes to the conditions
Yes, sir.
decision based on discussions that were had at the last meeting, and also based upon additional input from the peer review consultant. So maybe we can go over those first.
Well,
I did have a couple comments on the,
hold on a minute, Jess,
Yeah.
please. Is the decision on the application for comprehensive permit that was on the website, is that the latest and greatest, or is there a revision to this?
I will rely on Carly for that. I haven't looked at what's on the website.
So the one
I
that
think it
you
was
sent,
January 7th, Carly. That's what the date was.
yeah, so you sent it on Monday, Paul, and it says revised as of January 7th.
Okay, yep.
That's the
Okay, so
latest and greatest?
I did send 2 copies, one of which was that only has the most recent revisions.
Right?
Other one, which actually tracks the changes that I made during the meeting last time that have already been discussed. So I didn't think that they needed to be kept in the ongoing version.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, and I have,
January 7th is the latest and greatest.
Yep.
okay. And
Okay,
both,
thank you.
both versions have been on the website, but I'm gonna
Yes, I saw
pull
that.
up that now.
All right. I'm sorry, Jess, go ahead, please.
oh, just, yeah, I didn't want to just jump to the waivers. I did have a couple things on the edits to the
Well,
body.
I think we're pretty much going to cover the what needs to be covered, don't you?
Well, there was one change that Paul made that I just wanted to adjust the wording on a little bit.
All right, where is that?
Um,
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
should we
ma'am.
just start from the top and go down? Is that okay? And then when Jess gets to her section,
So
we,
yeah,
I would
Okay, I see.
suggest we
I see.
start
Okay,
on
okay.
page 19, because that's really the first substantive change. There's just a couple of changes to dates at the beginning, and then there is some
Yeah.
changes, taking out town planner and putting in building commissioner in a few spaces, and that was discussed at the last meeting.
Yes,
First real substantive change is on E27 on page 19.
um, yeah, and I was just gonna point out on A2, in the thing you added in, you had in some of the language you added in, you had an extra comma in one spot, just really petty thing, but, and
Where is
also
that?
in A2.
A2,
A2, yep. Towards the end where you have it, architectural details contained in the plans entitled Air Commons.
Okay, yep, I got
Then
it.
you filled in with revisions through October 11th, comma, 2022.
Bad deletion on my part.
And then in A5, further down,
Yep, I see that 157 and 155 do not match up.
Yep.
right,
I get confirmation,
155.
it's 155. There was a change there that,
okay, so we can, is that it, Jess, or do you wanna?
Yeah, and then I had some, I'm just trying to find where it is. Rewording on, it's not till, I think it's E7.
yeah, you go ahead. I got one on E E20.
Yeah, it might not be E7, it might be. Oh yeah, for me, it's E18.
For the snow?
Yeah, just the last line. Proof of notification of the location of snow storage areas shall be provided to the snow removal contractor. That's not we need to have proof that the snow contractor got the locations. So I would just suggest rewording that to proof of notification of the location of the approved snow storage areas to the snow removal contractor shall be provided to, and I'm not sure, building commissioner, conservation agent.
I would say
what
building
we do,
or both.
notification.
They say it was provided to the snow removal contractor.
Yeah, that proof of the location of snow storage areas.
I think it would be better to go proof of notification to the snow removal contractor.
Yeah.
Of the location of the snow storage areas shall be provided to the building commission.
Yep, that's fine.
That works, yep.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I had a concern about B1, which is, ahead of this.
Is it
And it
B1?
talks about
B1,
27 units being available for low-income housing. I mean, this project is 100% affordable housing.
We have had this discussion before.
yeah, yes, we
Not
have.
require more than 25% of the units to be affordable, even though the proposal is for 100% affordable.
Right, I understand that. I was just concerned that, when I see that in there, it's almost like saying, well, we'll accept 25%.
That's the law.
But we will. I think ultimately we were, By
No,
state law
because they
mandated
applied
to.
for 100%. I don't think that 25% is in the interest of the town at all. That's
If
why I
if they
don't like.
wanted to change the percentage, they would have to go back to the subsidizing agency first, because that would invalidate their project eligibility letter, which was based on the 100%.
But according to what I read further in, the application was based on 100% affordability.
It is.
When you look at where the state does the driveway entrance, they said that this was based on 100%, this application was based on 100%
Yep.
affordability. So if we leave this 25%, I'm afraid that at some point in the future, they're going to say, well, all we're required to is 25%. But what the town is looking at, I think, is this is 100%.
And I appreciate that. I will tell you that I had a case in which I drafted a decision for a board on an application that was 100% affordable. And I put in a provision that the applicant proposed 100% of the units will be affordable, and the board requires that 100% of the units will be affordable. There was an appeal taken to the Housing Appeals Committee, and the Housing Appeals Committee struck that condition, stating that went beyond the authority of the board to impose.
So the problem I have is they come before us and say, this is 100% affordable. And then once they get our stamp on it, 2 years down the road, they go, well,
So
we don't have enough applicants to fill it, so we want to go 25%.
They can't do
I
that.
think
John.
that the biggest concern I would have with regard to that is going to be discussed during the waiver provision, where there's a proposal to waive a number of local fees. And I think that to the extent the board determines that it'll be willing to grant waivers of certain local fees, that should be tied into the project remaining 100% affordable. And that if there's ever any.
Okay, well, I didn't see it in the
Level
waiver
of
list. That's why I
affordability
bring it up
that-
now. But if it's in the waiver list, then we can wait till we get to it.
Well, I think it's not in the waiver list currently, but it's going to implicate the waiver list. And that is something we probably should address therein, to the extent that you determine to waive any of the local fees.
Well, then I'll save it till we get to the waivers then. I'm just uncomfortable with that being in there because, the town's making a big commitment to this project, and then to turn around and it doesn't give us the inventory we're looking for if they go to
Well,
25%.
To clarify, you're going to get 100% of the units counting on your subsidized housing inventory, irrespective of whether or not they're 100% affordable, because this is a rental development. As long as 25% of the units are affordable at 80% area median income, which is what this decision requires, then the town gets to count 100% of the units. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that, you should be happy if they come back in and change to 75% market rate, because that's still, a great reduction in the number of truly affordable units available in town. But it's not going to impact your subsidized housing inventory.
I didn't think they could do that once they got state approval. I thought it had to be 100%.
Well, again, it would be inconsistent with the project eligibility letter that they had received. So they would need to get that amended, which they wouldn't be able to do unless they used a different subsidy program. So it's very unlikely it would happen.
Okay. We'll hold off on that, John.
So we're going to address that with the waivers at some point?
We're going to get into it a little bit later, he said.
Okay, well, that's fine with me.
I had a question on E20, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Who takes care of the sidewalks, walkways?
Internally, it's the applicants.
But this is, okay, they were pretty specific about doing the internal roadways and driveways, providing access for residents and emergency vehicles, but nobody said anything about the walkways or access points. So I was just kind of curious, where is that addressed, or if so, where?
We can put it in right there. So the applicant is responsible for the sweeping, removal of snow and sanding of the internal roadways, driveways, and sidewalks.
Okay, that works. Thank you.
Add entryways to that.
Yeah.
Okay, so are we comfortable to go to page 19?
Yeah, I think so.
Mm,
There was a note on E6, I don't know if that's an old note, where the signage was not addressed.
That's an old
That's
note,
an
I
old
think. There's no signage. Or it's in the, no, wait a minute, it's in the waivers, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, it's in the waivers.
Okay,
So yeah, we can go to 19 now, I believe.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am?
if I may, actually on that E6, I think we had talked about this at the last hearing. So the first statement is correct about the signage shall be shown on the final plans. But we discussed at the last hearing that we're not seeking any waivers at this time for signage. So that may just need to be something that's caught up because it's on the updated waiver. It shows that that's been removed. So we've not at this time requested a waiver. And as we discussed at the last hearing, when the applicant presents its signage on its final plans, if there would be a need for a waiver, then we would have to come back before the board and present that and ask for the waiver at that time. So I don't know if Paul, if you want to take that second sentence and revise it or delete it.
I thought it was still in the waivers. I'm looking right now.
So I would delete that second sentence and replace it with no waiver of signage requirements is requested. New sentence, if the applicant subsequently determines a waiver is necessary, it shall seek a modification of this permit pursuant to 760 CMR 56.0511.
That's acceptable to the applicant.
Are we ready to go to E27 now?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I just added a sentence to this condition, and this comes from the list of suggested conditions from the peer review consultant. So it states if such pavement is located within the buffer zone to a resource area protected under the Wetlands Protection Act, the applicant shall obtain necessary approvals from the Air Conservation Commission for such work.
How you feel about that, Jess?
That's fine for me.
Okay,
All right, F2, I don't think we've really come to meeting of the minds on this particular condition yet.
that is correct.
Going to require some additional discussion. However, I think that discussion is probably also tied into the discussion on waiver of fees. So maybe we hold off on going over this until we talk about the fee waiver.
Yeah, the town, we've been going over this for like 2 weeks now, so we have something we'd like to discuss, but of course during the waiver of the fees portion.
Okay,
Thanks.
Okay, conditions F4 and F5 are also added pursuant to the peer review list of suggested conditions. So F4, the applicant shall submit a revised plan showing fire engine turning movements, which shall show there is no conflict between the wheel of the fire truck and the proposed curbing. Then F5, the applicant shall supply detailed grading information as part of the final plans to ensure that all accessible parking, walkways, and building entrances will comply with applicable Architectural Access Board and Americans with Disabilities Act requirements.
I thought previously when we went through this, that they revised the drawings that show the wheels do not touch the curb, but the bumper, and the overhang in front of the tires does go over the curbing. And I thought they updated those drawings.
Hi, this is Taylor Dowdy. That's correct. That information is correct. Jim Thorpe at Green International had a different opinion.
Okay.
Yeah, the Green International peer review letter stated that needed to be further addressed through condition.
okay.
All right, the next change I have is on H2. Having to do with water, sewer, and utilities. Adding a sentence Such consultation shall include a discussion whether gate valves to the main on Fitchburg Road should be added. And again, that comes from the peer review consultant conditions.
Is that something we would normally do in town? I didn't think there were gate valves on the street, isolation valves. Is that true, Dan?
Yeah, Dan from the DPW.
Wow.
Who is
Yeah,
Max
so
Headroom?
whenever a developer
Max
comes in
Headroom.
for any site, we, and they're connecting to our water.
You
system,
automatically put gate valves
We
there?
do require proper valving.
Yeah.
Can you see me? I'm on my phone, my computer. I've already been working with Taylor Dowdy offline on what will require, the water department will require for that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
We're okay with that condition?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In H3, I just added in the air water departments. Presume there's no issues there. H7, this came from a discussion that I had with the conservation agent. She was concerned regarding trash and recycling being made the responsibility of the residents of the project rather than the management company of the project. So I've added the sentence, the requirement for trash and recycling removal shall be the responsibility of the applicant and or its management company and shall not be the responsibility of the tenants of the project. Any concerns with that?
Yep.
Okay. For the heading under I added wetlands, environmental, and then stormwater conditions. And that is because I added condition I-15. The applicant shall provide a percolation test prior to the issuance of building permits to confirm the infiltration rate for the proposed stormwater management system. And again, that came from the Green International Peer Review.
Isn't that just a normal process where you perk something before you build on it?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's definitely typical.
Hmm.
So I explained this to Jim. This is Taylor again. Sorry to interrupt. I explained this to Jim that percolation tests aren't really done anymore under the 2008 Massachusetts Stormwater Standards. It's really a test pit and you do a soil evaluation. I'm happy to do a percolation test, but at the same time, I'll be doing a soil evaluation as well. And it's really the soil evaluation in terms of whether it's loam or sandy loam or et cetera, et cetera. That's what really determines the infiltration rate, not a percolation test.
So what do you do? A core sample?
It's not a core sample. It's an actual deep hole test pit done with an excavator.
Well, I know what a perk test is. I'm asking about how you determine your permeability.
You don't determine the permeability. You do. You have a soil evaluator actually go into the hole and evaluate the soil sample. Really, it's kind of a hand test, and you look at the color, you look at modeling to determine seasonal high groundwater, and at that point, you determine whether it's loam, sandy loam, clays, or et cetera, and it's those classification of soils that you use to come up with the Rawls rate, which is a way to estimate the amount of infiltration that will happen in a stormwater pit. It's direct language right from the stormwater handbook.
How deep's the hole? How deep's the pit?
Typically, you're supposed to go down to about 2 feet below where you're estimating the elevation of discharge of the stormwater. So
Okay.
it's typically 6 to 8 feet tops.
Okay, thank you. I'm just curious.
Yep.
So are we leaving that condition as is, or are we changing it to soil test?
No, I think that's fine the way it is.
Okay. And the last new condition I have is J9. Overhead utility wires run along Fitchburg Road. The applicant shall revise its final plans to ensure that all of the honey locust trees to be planted are a minimum of 10 feet to 15 feet behind the overhead wires. The applicant shall consult with the utility company prior to commencement of construction and will adjust trees and sidewalks as necessary. And again, that came from the Green International Peer Review.
Yep. All right then.
All right, so that's everything that I have on the body of the decision. And then we go to the waivers.
Oops. Sorry, I will go right back to it. Share.
So the applicant's list of waivers began with a preliminary statement that requested waivers of all town bylaws, including but not limited to Ayer zoning bylaws, the Ayer zoning board of appeals, chapter 40B regulations, subdivision rules and regulations, board of health regulations, and any other local rules. The request goes on to state the applicant requests an exception from each and every provision or requirement of all local requirements and regulations issued by a local board. I never recommend that boards grant that sort of blanket waiver because it makes your decision subject, to being overturned on appeal. Because if you're granting waivers without actually having specific information as to what those waivers are, then it renders your decision vulnerable as being arbitrary and capricious.
Yeah,
So
I would say.
my recommendation to boards is always get the specifics and deal with specific waivers. Do not grant blanket waivers. So the first waiver, that's the substantive waiver, zoning bylaws section 1.4, which requires all uses and structures to be in conformance with the town of Ayer zoning bylaws. Obviously, this project could not go forward if it had to comply with all of the town Ayer zoning bylaws. So this is a waiver that, if the board is intending to approve this application, it would need to grant. Waiver 2, zoning bylaws section 3.5, requires site plan review by the planning board for multifamily structures. So this is a procedural waiver rather than a substantive waiver. And my recommendation to boards is always that you note where procedural waivers have been requested, that you do not grant the procedural waiver, but you note that it's not necessary because it is actually that process is subsumed within the comprehensive permit process. So no specific waiver is required. So that's my suggestion on number 2. Number 3, zoning. I'm sorry.
Should that be waiver denied as unnecessary, not denied?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yep, denied. Yeah. Number 3, zoning bylaws section 3.5.4, the decision criteria for site plan review. So as I reviewed this provision, it seemed like it was a mixture of both procedural and substantive requirements. I think important to note that the board actually did do a site plan review as part of its review of this application. So I recommend that the board grant this waiver. Number 4, zoning bylaws section 3.3.5. This allows the board to grant a performance guarantee as part of site plan approval. You don't need to rely upon the site plan approval process in order to require a performance guarantee.
Wouldn't that be 3.5.5?
Yes. Apologies. So I recommend that this waiver be granted. Zoning bylaws section 3.5.8, again, is a mix of procedural and substantive waivers. It contains provisions setting forth where multi-family dwellings may be allowed under site plan review. So to the extent that that is a substantive requirement, that waiver would be necessary for this project. So I recommend it be granted. Zoning bylaws section 5.2. This is the table of use regulations. So the applicant's requesting a waiver to allow multi-family dwellings in the A2, GB, and LI zoning districts. They're not allowed in the A2 and the LI zoning districts and only through a special permit in the GB zoning district. Again, so a waiver of this provision would be necessary. Number 7, zoning bylaws section 5.2 and 5.3, addressing accessory uses. So the applicant does propose certain accessory uses as part of this, including parking, community building, recreation area, dog yard, and other amenities. So again, I recommend that this waiver be granted. Zoning bylaws section 6.1. which requires conformity with the schedule of dimensional requirements. So they are asking for waivers of specific dimensional requirements. And I recommend that that waiver be granted, but I'm also referring to there are more specific dimensional waivers that are set forth herein. So this waiver is granted to the extent that those are listed. Zoning bylaws section 6.2 contains the list of specific dimensional requirements. So the applicant seeks a waiver of the building height requirement from 35 feet to allow a maximum height of 56 feet 4 inches. The applicant requests a waiver of the maximum number of stories from 3 to allow a maximum number of stories of 4 stories. The applicant requests a waiver of the minimum front setback requirement of 30 feet to allow a minimum front setback of 25 feet. The applicant also requests a waiver of the side yard setback of 25 feet to allow a minimum side yard setback of 15 feet. Again, these are all necessary in order for the project to move forward as proposed. So my recommendation is that the board grant this waiver. Zoning bylaws section 6.3b. The section requires all structures to have frontage on a public way. The applicant requests a waiver to allow the 2 residential structures in the community building to be accessed via the interior driveway with aisles at least 20 feet wide. I recommend that that waiver be granted.
What about the second phase? They have to come back for that?
Well, no, you're approving the entire project.
But you've only identified the two buildings and the 2 front buildings and the community center. What about the third building when they go to build it?
That's a good point. Stephanie, do you have input on that?
Can you repeat that question again?
Well, I'm
So,
looking at it. It says the applicant requests a waiver to allow 2 residential structures in a community building to be accessed via interior driveway with aisles at least 20 feet wide. If my memory serves me correctly, your drawings show the 2 buildings out front on Fitchburg Road and 1 community center. But what about phase 2?
The back building.
Right.
So there are 3 residential
So
structures.
that's not in there.
Yeah, sorry. I think that may have been a typo. That should have been the residential structures, and not the 2. Yeah, I think that 2 should not have been there. I apologize.
Well,
for
we
that.
can confirm that there are 3 residential structures proposed.
There's not, it's 2 residential structures, which includes the phase 2, the community building, and then there's 1 other residential structure right next to the community building.
So there's 3.
Well, if you're
There's-
calling the community building a residential structure,
Well,
yeah, right.
You just said,
2 residential, 1 community.
Well, I think, wouldn't it just be good to go with Stephanie's suggestion and just
Yes.
say the residential structures?
what do you mean? Just strike the word 2?
Yeah. I mean, because all
Right.
the residential structures do need access, so.
That's a pretty broad brush, Jess.
mm,
I mean,
Well,
theoretically,
I think
it
it
could
would be
be
better to
5.
say the residential structures as shown on the
Yeah.
approved plans.
Right. That's acceptable.
That's good. Yep.
What number are we on? I'm sorry, I lost my way
The
here.
10,
And
10.
Sorry. Thank you.
all right, so number 11, zoning bylaws, section 6.3H requires a minimum floor area of 750 square feet for the dwelling units on the single floor. The applicant requests a waiver to allow for 18 of the 1-bedroom units to be sized between 576 and 686 square feet plus or minus as shown on the approved plans. Again, if the board intends to approve this as proposed, then this waiver would need to be granted. Number 12, zoning bylaws, section 8.2 and 8.25 addresses the floodplain overlay district. Uses allowed in the floodplain overlay district are limited to uses set forth in the bylaw. These sections also require a special permit from the Board of Appeals. The applicant requests a waiver to allow the board to approve the construction of the subsurface 4-inch sewer line through a portion of the FEMA A flood zone as part of the comprehensive permit. This waiver request is partially substantive and partially procedural. So my recommendation is that the board grant the waiver for the substantive provisions of these sections, and then to note that no waiver is necessary for the procedural portions.
I thought I asked this question once before. but the sewage line, I thought it was bigger than 4-inch. Wasn't it 40-inch or something? I thought it was 4. I thought it was bigger than 4.
40 was
This-
a very large sewer line.
This is Dan. Taylor is the force main we're talking about. Is that 4 inches? I don't recall from the plans, but it's the force main they're talking about, I believe.
Because it says approved
Correct.
construction of
I'm look-
subsurface 4-inch sewer line through the portion of the FEMA flood zone. What 4-inch sewer line?
It's the pump, the force main is the size at 4 inches.
Is it really? I thought, then this is the one that's going out through the wetlands?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Wow, I thought it was bigger, much bigger than that. All right. Thank you.
You may be thinking of the town sewer line that we're connecting to. I believe that's a 36 or maybe even a 42.
Okay, all right.
24. The town's is 24. Up the
24.
gravel
Okay.
connect into, yep.
All right,
That's up the hill, yep.
thank you.
All right, number 13, zoning bylaws, section 9.12, off-street parking. The applicant requests a waiver to allow for a total number of parking spaces of 155. Again, that waiver would need to be granted in order for them to proceed as proposed. Number 14, the applicant withdrew that waiver. Number 15, zoning bylaws, section 9.1.5.c.2, off-street parking. Section prohibits a parking space from being located within 8 feet of a building wall, except enclosed parking spaces, or 10 feet from a lot line. The applicant requests a waiver to allow 7 parking spaces on the eastern side of the property to be located within 5 feet of a lot line. Again, that waiver would need to be granted in order for the project to move forward as proposed. Number 16, zoning bylaws, section 9.1.6a, landscaping and lighting requirements. This section requires a landscape buffer of 10 feet for all parking areas having more than 5 parking spaces. The applicant requests a waiver to allow a landscape buffer of 5 feet. Number 17, zoning bylaws, section 9.1.6.b.2, landscaping and lighting requirements. Section requires a minimum of 1 tree per 10 parking spaces. The applicant seeks a waiver to allow landscaping as shown on the approved plans.
And Paul, you had initially, your comment's still there. Or on the initial thing, you'd said how many trees per parking space are being provided on the approved plans?
All right, so Stephanie, do you want to address this?
Sure. So, and if it helps, I could even pull up share my screen, but basically there are 45 trees that are kind of around the perimeter of the parking areas. There's more than 130 plus on the project site, but thank you very much. So going around the parking areas here, you'll see in green kind of the areas where there's proposed to be trees. Under the provisions of 1.9.1.6b2, I believe, it's a little bit murky whether the bylaw anticipates that there be like vegetated islands within the parking area. And if you look at the plan here, there really aren't any vegetated like islands like you would see in a grocery store parking lot. But the way that the parking is kind of distributed throughout the site, it's not like one huge concrete island. So we've asked for that waiver. It's as Paul may characterize it, it may be part procedural and part substantive. But just so you know that there are a number of trees that are kind of in excess of the requirement of the 1 to 10, I believe.
Stephanie, this is Frank Valdez. Are you showing the plan or no? Because
Carly pulled the plan up.
the plan is not being shown, so.
No, I thought you said, Stephanie, you were gonna share your.
Here, sorry, I was seeing it. Let me see if I can pull it up here. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
There we go.
Okay, sorry about that. I thought it was showing. I apologize. So the areas all around kind of the edges of the parking area, and then along here you'll see. And Frank, I'm glad you're on. The number is 45. Is that correct, Frank?
It is correct. 45 of actual trees, but in addition to that, you can see that not depicted in green are additional smaller shrubs and other components that will also have growth and height. But we just depicted the trees. But there's a lot more landscape as well, not indicated in green.
Right. So in that regard, the quantity of trees is meets and exceeds what would be required. It's just the way that the wording of that bylaw provision was written. It was unclear if it also contemplated islands of like trees on like in an island area within the parking lot. And the way that this parking area is set out, that it goes around the various buildings within the development, that doesn't work with the layout of the project.
I think that the way that it's written is for large parking lots that usually become vast spaces of just emptiness. And I think that that's the way it's written, but our layout is not that way. So.
And so what I would recommend is the board action be waiver granted to allow landscaping as shown on the approved plans. Does that work for everyone?
Works for me.
Works for me.
Okay. 18 zoning bylaws, section 9.1.6.c. Section requires a 4-foot landscape strip to be provided between the right of way and the sidewalk. The applicant requests a waiver to allow a grassed area between Fitchburg Road and the sidewalk. Again, that's consistent with the plans, so I presume the board wants to grant that waiver. Number 19, that waiver request has been withdrawn. They're going to provide the appropriate number of bicycle parking spaces. Number 20, zoning bylaws, section 9.2.8, open space and landscaping standards. Section requires a minimum of 50% of the required open space to be provided in the front of side yards of the property. The applicant requests a waiver to allow 34,132 square feet of open space in the front yard and a total of 328,954 square feet of open space on the property. Again, I would recommend the board grant that waiver. Number 21, wetlands bylaw, section 2, part B. This section describes the performance standards for work in the 50-foot buffer zone and any inner 50-foot do not disturb zone. Stephanie, did we ever clarify this one?
Yes, if you see on my note there that I had previously provided on the side, that the work on according to the project plans, is that the work within the inner buffer is shown. It includes that sewer force main across the wetland area, and as well as a limited pavement for access for drives, approximately 5 parking spaces, and then a small retaining wall to accommodate the vehicular turnaround for phase 2. And that was updated on the waiver list.
And so how is this inconsistent with the performance standards?
Taylor, are you on right now?
I am, yes.
Okay.
Stephanie's note that she has on the side indicates we are crossing the inner 50-foot do not disturb zone slightly to allow that turnaround to happen. That's where the inconsistency occurs, I believe. Does that answer the question?
Is there any questions or concerns?
Well, that's, so there's just a turnaround by that back building, but, I'm just looking at it. But the whole sewer main crossing the intermittent stream is.
Yeah, the sewer main obviously crosses the inner 50-foot
Right.
and actually crosses the wetland in and of itself.
Right. So. Okay, I know that will be reviewed by conservation under the Wetland Protection Act and stream standards, so I'm okay with that.
Right.
Thank you.
Number 22, wetlands bylaw, section 5, permitting applications and procedures. And again, this is a procedural waiver regarding the filing of the notice intent.
I
I don't know why I keep writing waiver denies.
denied yet. Yeah, so it is unnecessary, and if we're denying it, I'm fine with the language as is. Because they still have to file the notice of intent under the Wetland Protection Act. So,
Okay. Number 23, Wetlands Bylaw, Section 7, Wetlands Mitigation. Section provides the mitigation necessary to meet the performance standards under the local wetlands bylaw. Applicant requests a waiver to allow the proposed work, subject only to an order of conditions under the Wetlands Act. Stephanie, can you address this?
Yes. So under the existing site conditions, the buffer zone is currently disturbed, and the project is proposing basically to mitigate by providing erosion control and providing a greater than 50-foot no disturb on the majority of the site. But there is going to be a limited area, again, where that work is proposed within the inner 50-foot buffer. Again, associated with the emergency turnaround for the portion of for the driveway adjacent to phase 2 and the 5 parking spaces that are adjacent to that, to the phase 2 building. And then under section B2, driveways are permitted to disturb the inner 50-foot where other options aren't available. So that we were seeking that. And then in terms of mitigation, as the project plans show, the project, it's just a temporary disturbance of the BVW wetland area to that where the force main is. The waiver for replication that we seek is under 7A1 and the associated subparts of 7A as to the design timeframes for vegetative cover and bonding under 7.4, 7.6, 7.7. With respect to, I'm sorry.
You all set?
Yeah.
Right, so what I would recommend is that the board action be waiver granted to allow work as shown on the approved plans.
this is for number 24?
23,
Oh, 23, okay, got it.
yes. So 24, general bylaws, Article 18, earth removal. This is again a procedural waiver that I suggest would be denied as unnecessary. 25, general bylaws.
Oh, and on 24, just,
Yep.
you might want to change Board of Selectmen to Select Board,
Okay.
just because legally.
Floodplain district prohibits the erection of buildings or structures within the floodplain overlay district with a special permit. Again, this is a procedural waiver request, not a substantive waiver request. So it's denied as unnecessary. General bylaws, article, whatever that is. Roman numerals were never my strong point. Section 5, street opening and driveway access permits. Requires a performance bond to be posted to replace or restore any public way in which the applicant makes an excavation. The applicant seeks a waiver of the requirement of this performance bond. Again, you don't need to be following this particular provision to require a performance bond from the applicant. You can require one performance bond that sort of covers all of the work in the development, but I don't know what the board's feeling.
We already mentioned the performance bond earlier on in the letter, didn't we?
Yes.
Yeah. But that doesn't say if the performance bond earlier part of the letter is all encompassing. It just says a performance bond, so that could be.
Yep.
That could be a pretty broad brush. So I think we need to define what their performance bond will be.
Yeah. This is Dan from the DPW.
Yes, sir.
The town doesn't have jurisdiction of the roadway there, so the driveway access way permit will come from Mass DOT. So it's really not our permit. It doesn't fall under our bylaw, in my opinion. That's what we typically do on a state road. That they'll have a permit through Mass DOT for the street opening driveway access way.
And you don't have any authority to waive DOT requirements. So
Correct.
Right.
at the end of the day, this is sort of not relevant.
Inapplicable.
Okay. And the performance bond noted earlier on in the decision references to the construction, not the access. Is that correct? What's the performance bond for earlier in the decision letter?
Now you want to wait.
I'm sorry, you didn't, nothing came across, sir.
I'm sorry. I said I'll have to go back and look at that. Do you want me to do it now or do you want to wait until we go?
Well, I'm curious as to what they're about a performance bond. It's like I said, it's earlier in the decision, but and then it shows up here.
What number is it earlier?
I'm looking now, Jess.
Got it.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Please.
I think you're speaking perhaps to waiver number 4,
Yeah.
where it's under section 355. It allows, the discussion there was the provision is allowing the planning board to impose a performance guarantee as part of site plan approval. Would that be what you're referencing?
I thought I'm sorry. I thought I saw it earlier in the decision that it was mentioned. That's what sort of caught my eye on it.
Yeah, and I'm not finding it either. So maybe
So,
go back in and add that as a condition.
so what is that guarantee on number 4? If is that not a bond? What is that?
So the number 4 is a waiver of a bond provision. So
Right, under site plan review, if this were under 40A and then planning board were performing a site plan review function.
So let's move on. I'm gonna.
Oh, by all means, don't wait for me. Just keep going. I can hear you.
Yeah, I'm not, I don't see it in there, but I can add a condition that addresses it. Basically, the board can impose a condition requiring a bond consistent with General Laws, Chapter 41, Section 81U, which is the surety provision in the subdivision control law. And that would cover everything that you needed to cover.
Well, the other one was number 24.
That's not a bond, that's a waiver of a bond too, though.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, it would have to be something that's in the body as a condition.
Right.
Yeah.
So I will, before we finish, I'll go back and I've got language in other decisions that address that. So I'll find it and add it.
So Paul, could I just ask a question real quick, just on the general bond for the entire project? Where the planning board would normally do that. How does that process unfold as this comes to, you know, what would the town's next steps be as far as getting that put in order?
So the way that the bond requirement is usually drafted is it's consistent with Section 81U, which has different ways in which an applicant can post a bond, and it would have to be based upon, you know, the amount of work necessary to complete, and there's usually some sort of a factor, you know, to take into account that you know, costs go up over time.
Okay.
So we're going to move on now to the waiver of building permit fees, which I think you guys might have a little bit of a discussion on. So while you're talking about that, I'm going to go and actually try to find a condition that'll address this, and we can go over that after.
All right.
So which one are we on now? Where'd it go?
Please.
27.
On 27, Town of Ayer Building Department fees.
All right, they're asking for Request a waiver of all building permit fees, demolition fees, and certificate of occupation fees. Did you guys see did the board see the spreadsheet that Carly sent out?
I did, yep.
Jess?
No, I didn't.
I can share that now and kind of go over it. So this is, I've been meeting with Alicia, Charlie Schultz, the building commissioner. Dan and Skalquick has been great in understanding what the total fee waiver amount is going to look like for the town. So we just put together a spreadsheet. I'm going to share it now just to give the board an idea of what it would look like. So I know we're on building fees, but while we're here, we're going to do water and sewer, if that's okay too, Mr. Chair.
By all means, go ahead.
All right, so the estimated fees for the entire project would be $294,000 in water fee connections, and $352,800 in sewer fees for a total of $646,800. The applicant is requesting 100% of the water sewer fees be waived. We've done some analysis. Dan has really dug deep into this with Alicia. And Dan, if you'd like to speak to this now, the town right now is recommending a 40% waiver, which would total $258,720. So Dan, do you want to just speak to that?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, working with Alicia, we kind of looked at it on a bedroom basis and came up with a number that's around 40%. So as you go over having more than one bedroom in a unit, we would knock off a bedroom on the bigger units, and it sort of worked out to that number. And I also worked with Barbara to kind of look at what we currently have in our water and sewer bank, so to say, because these fees go to that bank, and these connection fees end up getting used, for the capacity we have in our system that we buy from Devon's, that we maintain so that more people can join the club at the water and wastewater plant. But it's a source of revenue, that'll get used in the future when we do major projects. So we're doing, proposing to do a major lining project, sewer pipelining next year on Sandy Pond Road. So things like that. Our water projects, we're looking for a new source. So, fees are important because the only other sources of revenue we have, the most major sources, are rates. There are a few other minor sources. So anyways, looking at it with Alicia, we thought maybe knocking it down to 40%, but also Carly, I think you'll probably get into, some other horse trading we'd like to see that would benefit the town, because the town, has to make sure we take care of our water and sewer infrastructure and the sustainability of our infrastructure. So we don't want to just give it all up, but I think we can work within this number here.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it. Then,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, on the building permit fees, so
Yes, ma'am.
Building Commissioner Schultz has estimated, based off the plans we have in front of us, that the total building permit fees would be $435,000. Again, these are estimated. The applicant's requesting 100% be waived. Charlie did an analysis of, the number of units, inspections per unit, and he felt comfortable with waiving 50% of the building department, the building fees for the permits. He estimated, the construction timeline, so he feels comfortable with that. And then in the building department, there's also the electrical inspector and the plumbing gas inspector. So how the town does those rates, so we get a permit fee is based on certain factors for electrical, plumbing, gas. 70% of the fee goes to pay for the inspection, and then the town gets the remaining 30% of the total inspection fee. So the town feels comfortable foregoing our 30% on those inspections. So they would just essentially be paying for the inspector to do the inspection. So we don't, based on the level of plan detail at this point, we don't have an estimated number that we feel comfortable putting out there, but we know we can waive the 30% at the end of the day. So what I did here was, and I'll get over here just real quick. The town has said since the inception of the project that we really, because it's a state highway and because we're adding over 100 units, that walkability is very important, and that, you know, that road is not a traditional quote neighborhood street. It's dangerous, you know, as being a state highway. So we have said from the beginning that we'd really like to see sidewalks and then connecting it to the other side of the street, primarily the Shop and Save. The town has done some work with MassDOT out there in the past, you know, putting sidewalks out there to connect walkers to the services that are offered in that part of town. So Dan has done some preliminary estimates on what that would cost as far as bringing the sidewalk out and then installing a crosswalk, you know, to Mass DOT standards. We're estimating $125,000 based on Dan's figures. So then I just want to go over here. If we, the total amount of dollars requesting to be waived just came from adding in the 646 on the water and sewer and the 434 here. So
But it doesn't have anything to do with the plumbing or electrical either, does it?
Right, it would be 30 or, yeah, 30% of whatever that total number is. But I don't have a number to base it off, so I made that note here.
Yep.
That the numbers will fluctuate. So it's a little over $1 million. What we did here was we put our, you know, 40% waiver at 258, 50% waiver gets 217. Then you'll see over here, we took out the 125, knowing that that's going to be a cost to the project applicant to install the sidewalk crosswalk. So with all of this, we would still be waiving about $350,000 in fees for the project applicant.
More than that, actually.
Well, yeah, it certainly will be more, but it, you know, as those numbers come in for the plumbing.
Through the chair, may I ask a question of Carly relative to the estimated building permit fees?
Yep.
If you know, what was that based on?
So Charlie took the latest plans and went through them and came up with that estimate. I didn't sit with him while he went through line by line, but typically he'll do like a estimated building permit fee for any project. He goes through the plans. Can I just ask, was your figure significantly different?
Well, I view this under the fee rate, under the published fee rate, it's 75 cents per square foot for multifamily construction. And so I just wondered what he was using for the square footage for the entire project.
Okay.
If you have that.
I can have him join the call if you give me 1 minute. He can assist with that if he's not already on. So I'm just gonna stop the share for right now.
Yep.
I'm gonna get Charlie on the phone, and then Alicia, do you have something on that?
So I think he might have estimated that on your estimation. We got an email from Annika, and I think he was just estimating it on the overall total cost of the project. So it really is very much an estimated number, which he came up with. And I was under the impression that the total cost of the project was 31 million for the phase one. But we got a note from Annika, and she said something about 23 million for phase one. And we just assumed that the 31 million was for both phases. So I'm not sure that he didn't have square footage for the back building. If you want to,
do you know what his square footage was for the phase one structures?
I don't know what his total square footage was for the phase one structures.
I'm gonna have him call in. Just give me 1 second.
Right, in the meantime, I actually have found language with regard to the surety, which I would propose adding as condition F6. And that would state the applicant shall provide surety for the completion of project infrastructure consistent with general laws, chapter 41, section 81U. The surety shall be kept in place and shall be automatically renewable until such time as construction of the aforesaid driveway and related infrastructure is completed and funds are released. The bond amount shall be calculated using the standard methodology established by the Ayer Planning Board for subdivisions.
I like that.
With the notation, however, that this isn't subject to subdivision.
What?
It's not, but this doesn't say that you're subject to it. It says consistent.
Right.
And going back to the permitting, the offering to waive certain amounts of fees. You were talking, I think it was Sam before, or somebody was talking about being concerned about the 100% affordable. This is where you can also link that these fee waivers are for a project that is 100% affordable or something like that. And then you don't need the wording in the other place.
It was John.
Okay, sorry, John. Yeah.
Incorrect. And that's what I was alluding to earlier, is we're going to be addressing that in the waivers, and we can note in any waiver that is granted that it's based upon 100% affordability.
Sam, can I ask a question?
Go right ahead, Michael.
So Dan, when we looked at that spreadsheet that Carly had up, what I liked about the piece under building inspection fees is it noted that, like with the electrical and plumbing, the town's essentially foregoing the 30% that would normally come into the town as the FAT. When you put your estimate in there, is it essentially the same that we'd be waiving that 40% because 60% is essentially what it would cost the town to do this work?
Yeah, it's partly because we'll still have to do our inspections as things are going along and being installed. So part of it is that, but it's mostly the connection fees are mostly associated with the capacity we have at our plants, and you're buying that capacity. So, we only have a set amount we have between our current plant and the Devon's agreement we have. So, and we can't just give that away. If we give it away, the ratepayers will end up having to pay more for when we have a future project come in for this, for example, on the sewer side. So we'll just have to borrow more money, to do that big capital project we want to do instead of more in the bank. But there is some associated inspection, yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
Carly, can you put that spreadsheet back up, please?
Sure.
One of the things that Charlie was trying to do was come up with numbers that he felt comfortable that he could afford to do all the inspections and everything like that, without having final plans, and he didn't get the numbers fast enough. So this was his solution to coming up, because it was understood that we needed to have some type of agreement tonight.
So Alicia, with that in mind, then now I'm a little bit more concerned, because I was looking at the percentages and that's really what I liked. Are you saying that 217 figure is the number Charlie thinks he needs to complete the project, or 50% of any fee?
No, that's what I understand. That's what it costs for him to do it.
Yes, he just wanted to make sure he could cover the time frame and everything. So the 50% was what he thought he was comfortable with, but you might want to talk to him. We might want to talk to him to just get a real confirmation on that. Any chance of that, Carly?
Yeah, he's working on it right now.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
And to clarify, the waiver request was for the permit fees, not the inspection fees. And I think that for the building permit fees,
no,
it
that's
would be
not
covered.
So there's inspections for the electrical, there's inspections for the plumbing, and there's inspections for the HVAC. You're not gonna have any gas.
Right.
Those fees are at 70%, 30 are waived. So those are one set of inspectors, but you're going to have building inspectors to inspect the building, the construction that you built it to
That's
code
right.
and all that kind of stuff. And that's the other inspection. And what really is kind of possibly a fudge number, because we didn't have your budget numbers, is what the total of that's going to be.
Right, but under the fee schedule for the town, it's based for multifamily for the square footage.
Okay,
So there's a building permit fee that's based on the square footage, so that's,
but I don't think we had square footage numbers. Did we have square footage numbers for your second phase?
Carly.
we don't have,
Here's Charlie.
So, Mr. Chair, if I could, Building Commissioner Charlie Schultz has just joined the call. So
Okay.
Stephanie, do you want to ask your initial question just on his estimated costs for the permits?
Welcome aboard, Charlie.
Thank you. Hey, Sam, how are you?
Good, thank you. Would you go through your permit pricing with Ms. Kiefer?
Yes. So the estimated total I received for the whole project was 31 million for phase 1 and 2. And all commercial.
31 million what?
Dollars.
Dollars, okay.
Yeah, for the cost of the total project, phase 1 and 2. And we calculate all commercial permits at $14 a thousand. Don't have the figures in front of me, but I believe that someone has a calculator, that is $434,000 for the total project.
okay. My question to that though is, this is a multifamily, these are multifamily. And under the fee schedule, it's 75 cents per square foot.
Nope, that's for 1 and 2 family residential only.
But there's a line item in the fee
Anything
schedule.
according to the Mass State Code Book, anything over 2 family falls into the IBC, and that's commercial. It requires construction control and affidavits to complete it. So it doesn't fall under. If you look at our pricing schedule on the first page, that is for 1 and 2 family residential only.
Okay, there's also.
I can give you an example to look at. If you look at re-roofing, a residential re-roof is $75 cut and dry. And then if it's a commercial building, they're at $14 per thousand. And that doesn't matter if it's 3 condos in a building or more. That's when they hit commercial, as soon as they're over 2 units.
Okay, again, the confusion is that on your fee schedule, there's a specific line item for multifamily. I think there's 1 family, 2 family, and then multifamily.
Do we have that fee schedule, Charlie?
It is on the website. I don't have it in front of me, but like I say, once I jump out of a single or 2 family residential, I'm in the IBC instead of the Ayer, International Building Code instead of International Residential Code.
Yep.
And once you hop into the IBC, it's considered commercial work, where you need construction control on it. And that's how I determine what falls into commercial. Hello?
Yeah, I'm here. We're looking at the
Okay.
chart.
Okay, sorry.
So 1 family, 2 family.
Multiple, 1 family, 2 family, multiple family.
Yeah.
Huh.
That is confusing.
Ms. Kiefer, do you have a square footage on both phase 1 and phase 2?
I do not have the square footage on phase 2, and on phase 1, I believe it's in the range of 70 to 77,000. I may have Annika who may be able to correct me on that number.
Hold on, I calculate. Let me see. I may have a piece of paper with me that's going to give me the square footage for the all the phases. Give me 1 second here to pull it out. Hold on. Okay, I have, give me 1 second just to see if I added, I didn't add phase 2 into this because I didn't have any dimensions for it, but phase 1 is roughly 69,400 square feet from the plan that was given to me.
Can Annika just, or Bill, someone confirm, Taylor, someone? Is that about right? 69,000 square feet in phase 1?
She said 70 to 77,000, somewhere in that range.
Yes, and phase 2 is about 58,221.
About.
That is gross.
130,000. Yeah. And like I say, I have no measurements to determine the square footage for phase 2. And it looks like there's a office building by the playground, by the larger first phase residential unit. And I had no measurements to calculate that out either.
Yeah. So phase 2 is 58,000. Call it 58,000 on 4 floors.
Okay.
And I mean, I can get you the specifics of phase 1.
The community center. No, I have phase 1 calculated out.
Okay, you have. Right. So that's okay. It's not an office building, it's a community center. There's no office.
Well, the community center.
Correct.
You know, so just right there, you have a community center. It's to me, it's commercial. All other projects we've had like this have been considered commercial. So that's how I determined it. It's the same policy we've used since I've been here. And I learned it from the guy that was here before me, and that he was here for probably 25 years.
So if we went with that total square footage of 130,000 square feet, it would be $97,000 in permitting fees.
Well, you have to calculate it out. You have the foundation is 75 cents per square foot if you're going to go that way. And then the total square footage is times 68 cents a square foot.
And what do you have for phase 1?
For square footage?
Yeah.
Yeah, for square footage, I have 69,400.
So
Mine without the community building.
So I think that's with the community building, by the way. I have 61,818
for phase 1.
For phase 1, and then it's about. Sorry.
Let me just. This is how I calculated it out. I have proposed the first building, 9,000 at 3 stories, was 20,000 square feet, and then there's 2 other smaller buildings at 3,500 square feet each, and that was 7,000 square feet. There's 2 more at 4,500, 9,000 square feet, and then there's the other 8 one that was 2 stories that was 10,400 square feet.
Sure.
And that's where I came up with 69.4.
It's not. You're not way off. You're not. out of the ballpark. I think it's a little bit less than that, phase one.
I'm just
But-
going by what was presented to me.
That's correct. That's correct. That's fine. And it's fine. You're
And-
not way
and-
off.
So
But-
not to cut you off there, but we can talk about square footage backwards and forwards for an hour, but if it's Charlie's contention that we're not going off that metric, that it's pointless. If Charlie's determined it's a commercial application and a commercial permit, I think we should
He
make
is
our
cor-
decision based on that.
He is correct in his assumption that it is a commercial
Thank you.
for the building code.
That pretty much.
And I'm sorry, this is Frank Valdez, the architect from the Miller Schaefer talking. So in case anybody,
That pretty much leaves the $400,000 permit fee in place.
Right, that's determined on the valuation that they presented to the
Right.
town of 31 million for the whole project. And I think if it was just phase one,
Yeah.
it was somewhere around 322,000.
and you're right. You're right. You're not way off. You're probably there. So
All right.
Thank you.
And Charlie, just while we've got you on the phone, so we're considering potentially waiving that 50%. You think with only taking in 50% of that permit fee, you and your staff can do all the work that's necessary for this project?
Yes, just to be safe, I ballpark figured the number of inspections, the hours it would take, all the administrative work and the plan review, and I'm comfortable that at 50%, the town nothing will come out of the town's pocket.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Kiefer.
Well, I think the first consideration, what I was going to potentially offer as a consideration relative to just the building permit fees discussion is that since the printed publication from the town has a multifamily at 75 cents a square foot, that the board consider that. I think the figure is going to be higher than that 434 if one bases it on 14,000 per $1,000 of construction costs. Phase two isn't fully priced out yet, and phase one alone is going to be like 23 million. And so the amount of the building permit fees is unfortunately going to put a real pressure point on this project, even at a reduction of 50% if the board were to look at it from the commercial rate.
Well,
I would ask the board to consider imposing, since there is a regulation in place that has 75 cents for multifamily on the books.
Ms. Kiefer, your architect just agreed with Charlie on the fee structure and the way it was presented. I
I
don't
think that he
understand
was-
how that projection was missed. Is that not true,
I
Mr.
think-
Valdez?
no, correct.
Again,
I'm sorry. All
I think that there's.
hold on, everybody. Okay, just back the bus up for a minute. Let's one person at a time. Ms. Kiefer was speaking. She was trying to get a point across. I get it, Mike, and Mr. Valdez. I get that. But point I want to make is that our building commissioner told everybody on this call this was a commercial construction, and that was what he felt the permit fee would be. Now, you're taking a published rate, not the published rate, a published rate for multifamily houses and trying to apply it to what we're doing here. This board, as far as I'm concerned, has to accept the input from the building commissioner and your own architect. I mean, they're telling us one thing and you're suggesting something otherwise. So go ahead, please.
Thank you. What I'm suggesting is that the statement as to which version of the code is being applied is slightly different than what the town has published as its rates. And so if
No,
the,
Hold on, Charlie, let her finish.
Yep, sorry.
if there's a documented published rate for 75 cents for multifamily, that there is a basis of a published rate that the town has, that would be applicable. And I think the kind of the other part of that, though, Mr. Chairman, if you will, is if the board wants to consider the waiver request and to look at it a different way, potentially the board could apply that, since as I'm pointing out that there's a published rate, that the board could, under its authority, under a waiver, consider just applying that versus applying a commercial rate.
Well, isn't it? the
Mr.
public-
Chairman, may I ask a
Wait,
question?
hold on, Jess, hold on. Charlie,
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question? I don't know where, first off, a multifamily can be a duplex. It's just more than one. Second, we don't have anything that for a fee that is 75 cents besides for the foundation. Then it turns to 68 cents, and that's by the square foot. I don't have my fee structure in front of me, but I do not know where she's coming up with this, that a multifamily is 75 cents a square foot.
It was on a published rate sheet that we just had a little bit ago.
But if that published rate sheet is specifically for residential, and so going back to what Mike was
This is
saying,
commercial.
I know, that's
So,
what I mean, the 75.
Can I clarify something? Again, this is Frank Valdez. So I think that it might be semantics is what we're talking about. Basically, when we're designing for a building that is, if we were to be designing for a building that is 3 stories and under 20 units or so, like a small building, you fall under a different code. The fact that we have multiple buildings per code perspective, we as a congregate, we have to comply with the building code as it applies to the commercial component. It doesn't mean that we have a commercial project. So there might be a misinterpretation as to what the logistics are between the language. And Mike, yes, I'm agreeing with you in the fact that we're not doing a single family home. We're not doing a 3-family home. We're doing a multifamily complex. And because we are approving multiple, a complex, we have to follow what the code tells us, the commercial component for approvals. It doesn't fall into a 1-family or 2-family, and that's it. So since we're not doing 1-family, 2-family, we fall into the commercial code. Doesn't mean that it's not a multifamily project. It still is a multifamily project, but as an architect, we need to follow the code, which throws us into the commercial component of energy efficiency and requirements on that. And I don't know if that's clear or not. I know it's not clear to me a lot of times, and I always have to read it. But yes, that's kind of the difference.
It seems to me that if the building construction mandates commercial codes, then I would suspect that everything else follows the same suit. It's a commercial construction project. That's the way I'd always look
Sure,
at
and it could
commercial. This is not a residential project by any stretch of the imagination. So it's a
Sam,
commercial
sure,
project.
sure.
And what they're debating is how we got to the permit
Sure.
fee.
Sure.
So there's about $250,000 difference between the way our building commissioner estimated the permit costs and what Ms. Kiefer thinks the building permit cost should be. That's the way I read it. How far off am I?
You're not that far off. And again, I'm saying that it's semantics in the way that the
Well, it's
interpretation.
$250,000 worth of semantics is what it is.
Yeah, I know. I get it, Sam. I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. And all I'm just trying to share with you is that the way that the building code designates buildings is perhaps different the way that you've designated these fees. The way that the building code says anything that is above a 3-family, they considered it not commercial in a way that it's a commercial building, but that it's no longer a small residential building. It could have retail, it could have like a lot of things. So they consider that to be a separate part of the code. Still residential, but it's a larger complex. So they take square footage into consideration into that.
All right, thank you.
Could we,
And Sam, could I?
Wait a
could I
minute,
just
hold
one
on,
more-
hold on. Let's, Jess, something you wanted to ask, Miss?
yeah,
I'm sorry.
I just wondered, if Paul has encountered this with other 40B projects.
I really haven't. I've reviewed the fee schedule. I've reviewed the definition of multifamily in your bylaw as we've been sitting here. To me, this is pretty ambiguous.
Yeah.
I couldn't really predict how it would go if this was something that resulted in an appeal to the Housing Appeals Committee. Housing Appeals Committee is generally going to look at exactly what was published at the time the comprehensive permit application was filed. I don't see a particular level of clarity.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah.
I think that
And I would agree with Paul in the fact that there's a level of uncertainty and unclarity between the two. And again, when we have to deal with it from an architecture perspective, the way that you get kicked over to a commercial versus single to 3 family is size. And that's it. That's the only distinction that exists between the two. So if you're doing
my experience generally is that large rental developments are considered to be commercial or industrial.
correct.
rather
And you're
than
not, yes,
residential.
yeah.
And Sam, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman,
Charlie,
if
go
I
ahead.
if I may
Please.
just add that I know we're talking semantics in how they're reading our fee structure and what our fee structure is, but there's always overlap. As a ZBA, that's why you're there for this. And even in our zoning book, when it comes to someone who falls into 2 different categories, it always says the most stringent will apply. I don't believe that this is even close to being able to call it a multifamily. It's a huge apartment complex. That is commercial. I believe it's cut and dry. I believe that it was read differently and no one inquired about it because that's how they thought it was. And I believe it's commercial.
Thank you, Charlie.
You're welcome.
Well, I don't think there's any doubt in anybody's mind whether or not it's commercial. I think the sticking point right here is the computation of the permit fee. That seems to be the sticking point. And I think as a board, we need to discuss whether or not we will support the building commissioner's estimate or we will override it. So I think that's something we need to discuss right here, right now, before we go too much further.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes, please.
from the applicant's perspective, I think that the cost of if the board were to look at this under the $14 per 1,000 feet, putting aside the conflict with the published rates, the number that is being kind of put in as the proxy for both phases, I don't believe it's an accurate number. It was I think the figure that was stated was 41. 31, excuse me. But phase 1 is 23. The amount of building permit fees for this project is really going to detrimentally impact whether or not NOAA has a viable project. And I say that because this gets into our prior discussion about it being a 100% affordable project. I mean, it's recognized that when a project like this comes before a town, it's not really a market. It's not going to marketable. People are taking hits all across. NOAA's a nonprofit, and that's the only way that they can provide this proposal for the benefit of Ayer is because they're a nonprofit. But there's some point that there's a breaking point, and I think that there needs to be a degree of flexibility in assessing the waivers, because I think that 31 million is going to be somewhat woefully short. It was 23 million, but the longer it takes to get final construction bids, that number is going to go up. So if you're basing it on 14 for 1,000, and so I would ask the board if they are considering our waiver request, no matter how it's calculated, that we take into account an ability for all parties to move forward and to make certain that the project actually can occur and can happen. Because this is one of those projects, unfortunately, that you get the compounding of fees, and it's cutting against the viability in a rather sharp manner. So if we have that discussion, I think that would be fruitful for all parties.
So to the board, we encounter this as architects in multiple 40B projects, this discussion, and though code follows this very vague descriptions of commercial versus, smaller projects, it is a very vague description. In most of our projects that we do for 40B in other areas, they are not considered commercial in logistics because the idea of commercial implies many other components that are making a lot more money and profit on it. So when I say semantics, it's because of that. It's the fact that people get hung up on the idea that code says commercial, but that's just the way that we need to design the building. But it does not mean
we understand that, and I don't think that the fact of the matter, whether it's a commercial building or not, is under debate right now. What's under debate right now is methodology used to come up with a permit fee. And our building commissioner says one thing, and you guys are saying something different. I'm not arguing the point of whether or not it's commercial. We know it's period. That's we have to accept that at face value. Now, what we have to do is determine what we're going to accept as a permit fee. Now, that in itself lies on a table in front of us.
Sure.
Jess, Mike, John, we have to determine what we're going to accept and deal with it.
Yeah, and Sam, you're correct on that. And I just wanted to clarify on the fact that in the end, it is a residential complex. It is, and that's the logistics, and that's it. It's a residential complex. And
I'm not belaboring that point.
Okay.
Whether or not it is a residential complex, that's correct. Is it housing for free? No. Someone is paying for that housing. That makes it a commercial venture. I'm not debating that. So I'm open to hearing what the board's got to think about this fee structure. Mike?
I think that one of the issues that I have is, I think that the board has been pretty generous, and I think the town has been pretty generous in the amounts that they're willing to concede to these fees, considering that there are the state is putting in money, there's some federal grant money. I mean, we don't really even know how much other money is going into this except for what's coming out of our pockets.
Well, my question, John, was let's narrow the field of discussion down further to what are we going to accept for a permit fee? Are we going to accept what Charlie submitted? Are we going to do some hybrid? Or are we going to accept what Ms. Kiefer thinks that she should be paying? What are we going to
we
look
need
at?
to support Charlie. We need to support Charlie. He is the person representing the town, and he is the one that knows how much it cost him to do this job, and I support him.
All right, thank you. Mike?
All right, so I agree that this is a commercial development based on the fact that they have to follow a certain code. It's commercial, but that being said, Ms. Kiefer has raised concerns that this project is in all likelihood going to be more than 31 million. And we can bounce this back to Charlie in a second, but from my understanding, Charlie has looked at the plans. It was his contention that this was going to cost about $217,000 to inspect on the town's behalf. I'd be willing to consider a cap at that
Mhm.
If Charlie thinks that that's agreeable. So say the total project cost comes at 40 million. Even though Charlie had calculated it on 31, he looked at the plans assumedly and believes that the town can do this for 217,000. I'd be fine with capping the fees there, but short of that, this is a commercial project to me. That 14 per thousand is sort of where I'm sitting.
Yes?
I'm okay with the cap. I'm still here.
Jess?
Yeah, I'm strongly in favor of this project, but I also think it's commercial and we also have to protect, I mean, I think Air taxpayers just got their new tax bills that went up a bit
Yeah.
this week. So I like Mike's idea of a cap to protect the project against rising costs. So that's where I would go.
All right. John, or Ron rather, excuse me.
Yeah, commercial standards are much more stringent than residential standards. And that also requires probably a more rigorous inspection. I don't, without going to Charlie's, time and calculations based on this personnel costs and other costs, breaking those all out. I think the argument again that I think we're all agreeing that this is a commercial in nature, it's commercial in complexity, and it needs to be. It requires a certain inspection that is more than just multiples of a residence, a regular residence.
Thank you. Ms. Kiefer, it seems to me that there's going to be a $217,000 inspection fee, permit fee with the cap on it. Judging by what I've just heard.
I hear you on that, Mr. Chairman. And, again, the reality is I think that, whether the project can move forward, it kind of involves the whole suite of waivers that the applicant has sought. So I don't know that I can provide a good response to that until perhaps there's a discussion on the water and the sewer.
Well, and then
I thought the water, I'm
for
sorry,
a
Paul.
waiver of the certificate of occupancy fees, and I don't think we've discussed that yet.
No, I thought that was all included in Charlie's fees.
So
It
that
was.
Part of.
It was, wasn't it, Charlie?
So the CO fees would be part of.
Yes, sir.
building
Oh,
permit.
thank you. It's all, the occupancy is also included in that.
Just for clarification then, Mr. Chairman, that's building and occupancy
That's correct.
for the entire, both
The
phases.
entire project, 217,000 cap.
The waiver decision would state waiver granted to allow building permit fees and certificate of occupancy fees to be a total of $217,000.
Correct.
It was also granted for 30% of the plumbing, HVAC, and electrical fees. Such waiver is based upon the applicant's proposal that 100% of the units in the project be restricted as affordable. Any change to the affordability percentage shall require a modification of this comprehensive permit pursuant to 760 CMR 56.0511.
Yes, sir.
Does that work, Stephanie?
If I can have one
Leaving
moment to
aside
check with
your-
my client.
Reserving judgment until you get to the water and sewer
Yep.
fees as well.
So would that be next on our discussion list, Paul or Sam, the,
Water and sewer would be next, I would think. And I thought we covered that already. I thought that Dan gave his presentation of what it was supposed to be, what it was going to cost. Yeah,
Dan, are you still on the call?
Yeah, I'm still here.
294 water, 352.8 sewer, 680, 646, 800. and the town recommended waiver amount of 258. So that gives the water and sewer, I can't do that one in my head. Was it around 390 something? For water and sewer?
Oh, the difference between the two.
Yeah,
Yeah.
388,080.
okay.
On the water and sewer, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
as you know, the applicant had sought 100% waiver fee, and I hear Dan's recommendation that there be a 40%. I would ask the board to consider something slightly higher than that, something in the range of 50 to 60%. I know that it seems like minor negotiations here, but really for this project, every dollar counts. And again, if I could just, do my reminder that really this is it's 100% affordable project. And it is providing a benefit to the town.
We are well aware of that, but we're also looking at not providing a handicap to the town.
Right, I appreciate that. And I mean, I guess the one benefit you could say for the town, so this is only to the connection fees, right? Water and sewer, but the town will be getting the actual costs being paid of the water and sewer for the project. So there's that stream of revenue that the project's going to generate for the
There's
town as
also
well.
attributed expenses that correspond with the revenue.
Absolutely.
I mean, right now,
Yep,
I think right now we're running at a negative to begin with. Water and sewer wise. I mean, every time we turn around, the water and sewer bills keep going up and up and up because we have to upgrade or we have to do more to the water and sewer system. And I was actually questioning whether or not we had the capability to accept the project of this magnitude.
Look
And
like
according to
Alicia
Dan, we
helped.
do, so
Yeah.
it's still something we have to pay for. Yes, Alicia?
So there are some other hidden costs that are involved in affordable housing. And I just want to mention them because they're hidden costs, they're hard to calculate. But every single one of our grants at this point through Massachusetts, because not just Massachusetts, but the whole country is facing a real housing crisis. And in that, so almost all the grant money is tied to whether you have and deliver affordable housing. Our MassWorks grant out on East Main Street, which was $3 million that the town got, was tied. Alan had to show a project that was proposed down there. It hasn't been built yet, but it was proposed down there to be viable for that $3.5 million for the MassWorks grant. MassWorks now has a housing component tied to it. Almost all the grants out there do. And it is because, and Charlie Baker's position was we have to build housing. Our new governor's position is we have to build housing, and it is a problem. One of the things that this project has, it has 16 units of subsidized housing. That means they will be subsidizing some of our residents' rent. And that is also of value. But I'm not trying, I know it's a really hard one, and that's why we asked Dan to be here to give us the sewer numbers. We ask everybody to be here to weigh in, and you guys are being asked to make a really hard decision here. But I just wanted to throw that out, that the grant money, and the town does get a lot of grant money. I think, in the last 20 years, we've had over $20 million worth of grant money come through the town. So that's just one piece there.
Ms. Kiefer, let me ask you a question, if I may. You're asking for a reduction in the water and sewer connection fees from 40% to 50%. Are your clients prepared to do the sidewalk and the crosswalk that we've asked for?
So we have, since the last hearing, we've been looking at that matter as well. And what we wanted to approach the town with, or with the board with rather, is somewhat of a hybrid in that it's my understanding that the town may be applying in any event for for grant money to do that work itself. But if that, to kind of spearhead kind of the project, if you will, the applicant would propose to do the engineering and the survey work for the sidewalk. And then
Well,
the
that's
intent,
that's not what we were looking for. That's not what we asked.
right, but sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
If I may continue though, as I said, it's my understanding that the town's looking for a grant to have that done. And so I think it might be, but kind of and as Alicia had been saying previously, kind of the attraction and the ability for the town often to get grants is the creation and provision of affordable housing. So if the town were to move forward on that grant process there, but to help kind of kickstart it, if the applicant agreed to undertake the engineering and survey work relative to the sidewalk,
So that's a
it
no.
would. I'm sorry.
So that's a no.
He's
No,
talking about a
not no.
hybrid.
Well, no, that's not what I asked, Jess. What I asked if the applicant was prepared to do the sidewalk and crosswalk like the town asked. That's all I want to know, yes or no. So she's saying she's offering a hybrid solution.
That's right.
Could Dan just weigh in on what we're looking to do out there? That would be really helpful, I think.
Yeah, sure. Okay, yeah, so currently, or maybe going back a little while, the sidewalk used to only go to Tiny's, but my predecessor worked really hard to get Mass DOT to put it all the way Shop and Save because we always saw people walking along the side of the dangerous road. And that happened a couple of years ago. So as part of this, we know people are going to be traveling from this new complex to the local grocery restaurant, especially low income, on foot, getting their groceries. So we need that connection, that controlled connection between the 2 points of the Shop and Save and the new site. Currently, the Shop and Save is undergoing improvements. They put in a permit while they were doing their site plan permit. They put in a permit with Mass DOT, who required them to extend the sidewalk across their frontage up to their western driveway. So we need to fill that gap to have a connection for these pedestrians. And obviously it's going to require a permit in coordination with Mass DOT. And then we'll understand exactly what the scope will entail, but we know there will be a sidewalk and then there would have to be a crossing. So that's kind of where it sits. I did, as Carly mentioned before, I did a quickie cost estimate and put in a contingency. And the engineering and the surveying, that's not too expensive in my mind. The construction's expensive, especially if it's on the town. We end up paying prevailing wage. So I would, and especially if we're already giving what we are for the water and sewer fees, giving up the 40%, I would expect the applicant to bear on the sidewalk project in entirety. That's what I would recommend and hope.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
through you, may I ask a question of Dan relative to, I hear what he just said about prevailing wage. Would it be something that would be possible? So I had suggested that the applicant would consider advancing the engineering. What if the town advanced the engineering and the survey, and then the applicant advanced the construction? Would that avoid the prevailing wage sort of?
It does avoid prevailing wage. Prevailing wage is only for construction, correct?
Is that conceivable, Dan?
It is. We'd obviously we'd have to pay for it, but it is conceivable. Yeah.
Oh, so we don't have any in-house capabilities? Just a minute, Alicia.
We'd have to get the survey. We could probably do the engineering in-house.
Okay, thank you. Alicia?
I've identified the source of where I would go for this money, but I do think we need to have someone in the backup for who's going to pay for it if we don't get the grants. Is there any way to write it that will be, it's understood that we'll try for those things, but if it doesn't come through, we define who's going to pay for what?
From what I'm hearing from Ms. Kiefer, no. Their project can't support 25 grand.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
I think maybe you misunderstood me.
Okay.
When I had suggested a hybrid, I had suggested that the applicant would undertake the engineering and survey, and then kind of listening to what Dan had stated, I then said, well, what if we flipped it? If it's the prevailing wage that creates potential increased costs for the town, if the town were to undertake engineering and survey, and then if the applicant were to undertake construction, if the grant money didn't come through.
And can I just ask a clarifying point, Alicia, the funding you were looking at, was that for construction or just for engineering?
It was for both. It's housing choice money, and the grants are up to 300,000. We got the money that we've used to do the planning on Park Street was housing choice. We can go there for the first year for the engineering, and then we can go there for the second year for the project. It's been done by other towns that way. So, and I have some other ideas too, but we won't go into them right now on where there's other money. I can't guarantee the other money, but I do know where, money is. And so you have to apply for all this. You have to put your applications together and develop it. But this is a project that I think the state will look very highly on. And the town of Ayer is very well respected in the state because we've done such a lot of work on in many ways on our housing, on our infrastructure, in so many ways. We are very well recognized even as a small town, but a town that does well. And that's why we've gotten so many grants over the years, is because we really do pay attention to these things, and we are well regarded at the state. So, there is, and we also support a department that, two people that spend a lot of time going after grants. So.
Yeah, and just from the town's perspective, just to bring it back up to 50,000 feet, I think at the end of the day, obviously pedestrian safety is the main concern for everyone. I think that the town just, hearing Dan and Alicia, would be willing to work on that. But I mean, the town would like a guarantee tonight that there's going to be some sort of connectivity from the project site across the street so that the new 100+ residents have a safe access to walk in that neck of the woods. So, Paul, I'm looking at you maybe for some suggestions, if you had any, or what.
I've got a draft condition if you want to hear it.
Sure, please.
So this would be a revision of the condition at F2. The applicant shall work with the town and the Massachusetts Department of Transportation to obtain permission for the installation of a sidewalk along the project's frontage on Fitchburg Road to the Shop and Save on Fitchburg Road. The town shall be responsible for the engineering and survey work for such sidewalk construction. The applicant shall be responsible for the construction of such sidewalk unless the town is able to get state grants covering the construction of such sidewalk. I don't know if you want to put a time frame in terms of when you would need to obtain those grants or not. But.
I like that. I like that. Ms.
Yeah.
Kiefer, can you people take that?
Is it possible to take like a 5-minute offline so I can talk with my team quickly just to make certain? I don't want to, because there's been a lot of new things raised this evening. So if we could take a 5-minute recess.
All right, everybody take 5.
Thank you very much.
Sam, it looks like Pauline's got her hand up for a question.
Oh, okay. Pauline?
Good evening, all. I've been with you for the last 2+ hours, so I appreciate how you all feel. This has been an extremely tedious meeting, but it's so important. I just want to refresh, and I'm not asking a question, but at the very beginning, John Ellis asked a question about the possibility for the applicant to move back to 75% market value units versus 100% affordability, which is not what their application requests. So I just wanted to remind you all that because it's been a long 2 hours and
That's-
some of the
what-
waivers.
Let her finish, John.
Some of the
Good call.
waivers speak specifically to granting them because it's 100% affordability. And that, in my personal opinion, is the key to approving this project. I would hate to see another Devon's Crest in 20 years, 30 years, or whatever. So I just want to take this time while it's just you guys and not the applicant
Well, they're here.
to remind you of that. Not that any of you have forgotten it, but I've been in your position. I know what it's like when you're in a meeting for 2 or 3 hours and you forget some of the details. So please keep that in mind to make sure it's all 100%, not 75% affordability.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for letting me comment.
That's one of the things that I'm going back to.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that.
Ms. Kiefer?
Hi, thank you for the indulgence, Mr. Chairman. I just needed to review with Noah and then also to kind of crunch some numbers quickly, which I tried to do as quickly as possible. And relative to the last pass that Attorney Haverty had read into the proposed language on the waiver and looking through the numbers. So if I can back us up just 1 second. So we were talking about a consideration of a greater than 40% reduction in water and sewer. But kind of as in exchange for a 50% reduction, the board had then moved on to the applicant to fund the construction of an offsite improvement. And so taking a look at that, just from a practical standpoint, and I'm glad that I had the opportunity to discuss this with Noah, there's a concern in terms of how that works out on their sheets, because that's an offsite improvement. And so it's not clear that they're going to be able to get funding for an offsite improvement. So that's going to be something a little bit hard, because to make this project happen, you know, as we've been talking about, this requires a lot of funding from a lot of different sources and a lot of state grants. So there's a concern that that's just going to be something that Noah's going to have to figure out how to come up with that money. But kind of the more concerning point is by imposing that obligation for the construction of it, it actually exceeds the benefit of the water and sewer, that additional 10% reduction. It would be more than what that is. And so I think that and I hear you and Noah hears you that there's a concern for public safety, and it's a municipal concern, quite frankly. But we would ask for the board to consider a 75% reduction of water and sewer connection fees. If the board wants to impose a linked condition, then that the applicant would work with the town and the DOT, and if it gets permitted, to do the construction of the sidewalk extending offsite.
So if I can just jump in, Stephanie, I think that the original 40% reduction on the water and sewer fees was planned to be based upon your client contributing to the sidewalk. So it's not just the additional 10% that's addressing that, it's the entire waiver that's addressing that. Is that right, Carly?
Yes.
Yes. All right, well, I think that there's a very real money point then that's going to be a problem for Noah. And Mr. Chair, if I could, I'm just concerned because we stated we'd be looking at grant money. You know, we would in-house handle the design and engineering. And if we are able to obtain grant money, which I'm confident based on our history, we could, then NOAA doesn't even see that cost. We would pay for it with grant money.
I think she's worried about the fact that we might not be able to get the grant and then they'd be on the hook for it and they'd have to come up with the cash to do it, which they don't have the facilities to do. So that leads us back to, if we don't ask them to support the sidewalk and the crosswalk, then the town would be after the grants to take care of it ourselves. There would be no necessity to reduce any rates whatsoever. Would there? That's the way I read it. I mean, it's a give and take, and we're given, and you know, it's got to work some ways. The fact that you want to reduce it from 40% to 75% is unreasonable, in my opinion. Dan's already given us the rundown of what the cost is and why and how it's breaking down. So if NOAA is not, in my opinion, if NOAA is not receptive to this minuscule sidewalk, then so be it. That means that we really shouldn't have to reduce the rates any further. That's my opinion. Mike? You're reasonable.
All right. So I'm still thinking on this, right? We came to, although maybe not on the part of no, I think we came to a pretty creative solution with the first piece.
Right.
And I think we can figure something out with this as well. Right. So one of the things that we have to consider is that $125,000 figure that Dan is estimating probably takes into account that, you know, we're not paying prevailing wage, because the second the town takes on a project like that, it doubles, because
Right.
you're going to pay, you know, a steamroller $400 an hour versus 100. So, you know, maybe we can find something somewhere to kind of meet in the middle, but you know, I agree.
Well, I don't.
Stephanie raises a good point, I think, but
I can't see reducing it to no.
No, I agree. I agree. I agree there. But, you know, she raises the point about not being able to do offsite work. I don't know enough to know whether or not that's a real hindrance, but
it does make sense.
you know, I think if we think this out, we can come to some amenable solution here. But let me think on it for 10 seconds, hear from the
Sure.
other board members, and I'll see what I
Yes.
Yeah, I'm still thinking on this too. It seems like the choice is we eliminate the 125,000 for the road, the sidewalk, offsite improvement. Then you're saying, Sam, we should stick with the original 40% waiver amount, right?
That's the way it works out. That's what we were looking at to begin with. If you remember the spreadsheet,
Yeah.
The deduction was already there, and 40% reduction of the sewer and water was already built into it.
Yeah. And, you know, I trust Dan's figures, so I probably would stick with that then too.
Yeah. John, what do you think,
Ken
bud?
Diskin has his hand up.
Who? Oh, Ken?
Yeah.
Mr. Diskin?
Sorry to interject, but thank you for the time. So we're talking about two subjects. I wonder if you can clarify something first, Mr. Chairman, because I haven't delved into the drawings. The sidewalk you're talking about is the sidewalk that's in front of their property, as well as extends beyond their property in front of the funeral home to make connection to across the street. In other words, when they say off-site, it includes right directly in front of their property as well. They have not engineered anything in front of their property along the street.
I think they have. I'm not, what we're talking about is a sidewalk from the end of their property that probably would run down in front of the funeral home and then cross over. That's that's the spot that's missing. That's the blank part of the road.
So they've already included the sidewalk in front of their property, according to what we're saying.
That's what I understand. That's correct.
Okay, so the next extension is only a portion of the distance across the funeral home frontage.
Yes.
Talking about.
Yes.
Okay, so it seems like 125,000 seems like a lot to do that distance, but it might be correct. And,
That's what I thought too, but I stand corrected a lot.
and the other thing is, I'm wondering if I can ask Mr. Van Skalvik a question through you and challenging him a little bit.
Don't go too far.
So, Dan, because the property in essence, is a units that are constructed, and we know we've established that they're kind of a commercial construction, but in essence, there's going to be one sewer main coming out to the street. We're not going to have a number of connections like you would on residential homes. Wouldn't it be, I know you're concerned with the total number of connections to the sewer treatment plant and whatnot, but isn't there some efficiencies in the fact that it's being built as apartments, and maybe someone could come up with a fixed price per unit versus trying to calculate the fees on a total basis, similar to what, and then you could max it out? I don't know. I'm not sure if you could do the whole project for, let's say, $1,500 or $2,000 per unit, rather than trying to use a standard calculation based on bedrooms, similar to what you do in a single family home situation, or a series of subdivision of homes, some type of thing. Is there an efficiency in the way it is being constructed, or is it just one way to figure it? That's my question, I guess. Thank you. Maybe the board could consider a fixed fee per unit, so the applicant pretty much knows where they stand.
Well, it's just like dealing with what Charlie's permitting fee was. I mean, we're not experts in water and sewer. We're not experts in building inspections. I mean, we have to accept the fact that we have these people who do this on a daily basis, and we have to accept their synopsis at face value. So if Dan says one thing, then we kind of have to listen to it. He's the professional here. I'm not. None of the rest of us are. That's his job. That's why he's here.
I get it, but I'm just trying to advocate for the concept of affordable housing as well, and simplify the process if it makes any sense to anybody.
Well, I understand, but like I said earlier on, I have no qualms about that at all. I'm for the project, but I'm also not going to let the town get hung.
So does Dan have a response to Ken's question?
I'm sorry, Dan, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So it's really, I don't like tying it, I would say, to a unit. We really base our fees on the bedrooms because it's the amount of flow we're going to get from that bedroom.
Mhm.
So that's how the fees are developed for that capacity. And we've already calculated it in this sense. So we know how much the total will cost. So I think if we just change the units, no pun intended, if we change the units from bedrooms to number of units, we may come up with a different number, but we kind of know what the total number is now already from the capacity. So, I think we can just use a percentage of that as we're going forward since we're already speaking in terms of bedrooms and in terms of how much flow and capacity is going to be taken from our wastewater and water supplies.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Come up with anything, Mike?
Still thinking on it. What about Ron?
Ron's always going to say no.
I forgot where we were with this whole thing. Yeah. So I think what are we considering again? I mean, we had a side argument here, what are we considering, Mr. Chairman?
What it boils down to is that NOAA doesn't think they can support an off-site accessory, being the sidewalk and the crosswalk, because of I don't know if they're funding sources or if they're limited to only on-site work or whatever the case may be. But
Okay, now I'm with you. So
Okay.
therefore,
we're looking at
what we're requesting for fees
yes,
and as presented.
yes.
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
Alicia
Alicia?
has her hand up.
Yeah, I saw her. Alicia?
Would people consider splitting the cost of the construction of the sidewalk, the additional sidewalk? This is the sidewalk down in front of, and doing the crosswalks with the understanding, as Paul wrote it, that if we can find grant money to cover that, that's what will happen?
I think the point Ms. Kiefer was trying to make, and I'm not putting words in her mouth, but I think the point she was trying to make was their funding sources, she didn't know if they had the capability to do off-site funding. They didn't know if they could have their funding is limited to the scope of work for the 40B, nothing outside the property lines, so to speak. So she didn't know if that would even be possible to do that. So
If I may, sorry, this is Annika Lambert from NOAA.
yes, ma'am.
The specific issue around offsite improvements, as far as the state's low-income housing tax credit program is concerned, not all offsite improvements are included as eligible basis, meaning I cannot with certainty say that the state money that will be funding the lion's share of the cost of this project will be something that I can use towards the sidewalk. Therefore, that money comes directly out of NOAA's pocket to fund. The amount of cost for the construction, especially just basing off of the estimate provided during this conversation, was approximately $125,000. That is a non-insignificant amount of money for NOAA to take care of out of pocket towards this. So for that request to be in exchange for a reduction of a fee that is already a very insurmountable cost for this project to support, it does not help us to pay money in the interest of a reduction of other fees that we have to pay. So I will say that first and foremost. But for the specific costs around the offsite improvement, NOAA can support some costs, which is why the counter argument was we would consider providing towards the engineering, which is a much smaller cost, because that is easier for NOAA, a nonprofit, to deal with out of pocket. But to take the gamble of having to consider covering $125,000 out of pocket is not something that I can in good faith commit to in this call. Obviously, if there's some compromise, potentially half with the town still taking the engineering towards it, I understand that there is a chance NOAA will not have to pay for a penny if the grant money comes through. But it is just a large cost to have to consider. And then I would like further clarification on something that was mentioned as far as if the grant comes through, that no reduction in the water sewer hookup fees comes forward. I think that was kind of mentioned offhand, and I would just like to understand that statement further. Thank you.
No,
That's not what I said.
Yeah, I don't think anyone made that statement.
Well, we can sit here and look at each other all night, or we can try to come up with an alternative.
So sounds like my creative solution is out the window. If the 125 is off the table, I don't, I want the sidewalk. Plain and simple. I think it's in the town's interest and the developer's interest to have a sidewalk from this development to Shop and Save. We're already, as we've gone through these conditions, and I don't want to go back to them, but we've talked about reduced parking. The idea being that this is a walkable site to some of the things that we have right downtown, Tiny's, Shop and Save. A sidewalk's important to me.
So what are you proposing? What are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting we offer a 40% waiver and we seek $125,000 from NOAA. I want to be creative here, but it doesn't sound like it's even a starter. I felt like we came to a good compromise on that first bit, but
what's the 40%? What's 40% of the sewer and water and sewer connections? I don't have a calculator.
I'll put the spreadsheet back up.
Mr. Chairman,
No,
I
it's
may,
still-
Hold on, Charlie.
okay, I might have a solution.
so it's under the sheet, it's 388.80.
That's 40%. No, that's what?
This is the difference between this number and this number.
So if we were to grant 75%, what would that number be, Carly? Just change that out on the 75, see what it comes out.
That's 75. 485, 100.
This is Dan. I'd rather, the water and sewer fees are more important for those enterprise funds. I'd rather just have this, pay for the sidewalk somewhere else and then go that far on fees, especially with our current climate and the, increased costs we've been seeing and our current status of our retained earnings.
I really agree with you, Dan. I do.
Yeah.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could just offer.
Charlie, go ahead.
Possible solution is by following Mike's first solution. If they would be acceptable to put a cap on the amount of the sidewalk that they would be willing to contribute. It may come in under the 125 estimate, but if they would have a number that they were comfortable with, maybe that could be the concession between both sides.
Well, I
Just a
think, Charlie,
suggestion.
it's what's going on here now. Water and sewer doesn't feel that they can afford a reduction. Not as far as they want to go, not as far as the client wants to go.
So
They're looking for 75%, and we're only offering 40.
Oh, I thought we were dealing with this sidewalk issue in the 125,000.
That's part of it. I mean, that was part of the discussion. Yes.
Yeah,
what,
sorry, I missed the beginning of the meeting, but just in case, the cap seemed to work for the other fee. That way they know their set cost. That's why I threw it out there.
Well, thank you.
what,
Something, Jess?
I mean, it sounds like what I heard Dan say or what I was thinking was just taking the sidewalk off the table altogether
Yep.
but not budging on the water sewer fees at the 40%.
That's what I understand. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, at that point, you could at least get the engineering, which was originally suggested.
Right.
But, no matter what, if it's not done by NOAA, the town's going to have to end up doing it. It's going to be a constant phone ringer of ours. And we just, we obviously we've gone over it 100 times. It's an important connection and to have a safe connection there.
I agree. I absolutely agree. So that's what I thought about earlier. Take the sidewalk off the table. We'll do the sidewalk through the town directly and leave the rates as they are. Leave the reduction at 40%. Like you suggested.
Looks like we had two hands up,
Uh,
Pauline and John.
Mr. Krantz,
Yeah.
I believe Pauline had her hand up first.
I'm sorry, Pauline?
Just a quick comment in response to Ms. Lambert, not being sure whether a 40B project could do off-site improvements. The Willows project, on which I served on the comprehensive permit committee, obtained $250,000 for a new water tank as part of that permit processing approval. The water tank was quite way off-site of the Willows project. So there is history and precedent for that. And I urge you to contact Alicia and get a copy of that Willows project permit, because there is certainly that opportunity. And I'll leave you to that. I just wanted to share that because I don't know if anybody knew about that.
Yeah, I remember it.
I
Thank you.
do
Good. Thank
appreciate
you.
that feedback. I certainly, without understanding exactly how all of their project expenses were paid for, there is a host of things that are and are not included within certain project costs where the developer fee kicks in. So it's something that I need to consult with my development consultant on. But as I had said, it's not something I'm prepared to accept in this meeting without that conversation, understanding exactly what would come out of Noah's pocket. There is a certain amount of money that the nonprofit could support for contributing to a sidewalk. And I would like to just reaffirm my assertion that I do believe the sidewalk is important, but with it being a state road and something that is far beyond the ease of working just directly with the town, it is a tough undertaking for us to consent to. But I appreciate the feedback, and Alicia would happy to receive any information on that project that you may have to see how they handled that
Thank you.
offsite improvement.
Mr. Krantz?
Hi, thank you. Jonathan Kranz, Chair of the Planning Board. I think we need to keep in mind the larger picture here. This project is a gigantic win for this town. It is something, these goals of affordable housing are goals that have been pursued by dozens, maybe hundreds of people on different committees and boards, all with the vision of increasing the amount of affordable housing here, especially in light of loss of the lowercase a affordable that we've seen. This is the best opportunity I've seen to date to achieve one of the most important goals in our master plan, one of the most important goals facing our country, which is housing. And I just think that we shouldn't lose sight of that for what is ultimately short money. What's at stake here is of extraordinary value, and if we put it at risk, we'll regret it forever. So I just
So if
ask
I
that we look at
understand
the
you
big
correctly, what you think we're doing is short money? Is that what you're inferring?
in return for the value that we're getting, when you do a cost benefit analysis, in return for the value, I'd say the sacrifice the town would be making is well worth the return that we get with this housing and the transformative impact it will have on our town. Yes.
Thank you for your opinion.
Thank you.
All right, well, we've got to take some action here because
I mean,
we're not going to sit here and just look at each
beating
other.
around the bush. So,
Yeah.
So
to me,
can I read back the proposed condition, just flipped around a little bit? So
Go ahead, Paul.
instead of the applicant being responsible for the construction of the sidewalk, we switch back to them being responsible for the engineering and survey work. So it would say the applicant shall work with the town and the Massachusetts Department of Transportation to obtain permission for the installation of a sidewalk along the project's frontage on Fitchburg Road to the Shop and Save on Fitchburg Road. The applicant shall be responsible for the engineering and survey work for such sidewalk construction. The town shall be responsible for the construction of such sidewalk.
Mhm.
And what do you feel that would be worth percentage-wise?
Well, I mean, I don't think you can really put the number on in terms of what it's worth percentage-wise, because as the applicant and attorney.
Well, the applicant's going to be looking for a reduction in the rate in order to give this up.
Understood, but recognizing that the way this project is funded is a little different than a lot of typical projects are funded, and that they're relying on different sources, and they're questioning whether they would actually be able to get the funding for this aspect of it. So in a perverse way, they may actually be better off paying more in fees and not having to put the money up front for the sidewalk funding, because they would be able to get the connection fees, would be able to get funding for those, where they wouldn't be able to get the funding for the construction of the sidewalk. I mean, I think at the end of the day, again, this is 100% affordable housing development that's going to be a benefit to the town. I think, that there's been a review in terms of the impacts that this project will have and what percentage of the fees are necessary to cover those impacts. So the 40% seems like a number that the DPW is comfortable with, and probably is what you should be going with.
Thank you. Jess?
Yeah, I mean, I think just to simplify the discussion, because the hour's getting on, I'd be just fine with just removing any discussion of the sidewalk from this comprehensive permit and just restricting us to, what are we doing with the water sewer rates? And I mean,
I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem at all.
I know, I just would like
spoke about
to-
it earlier.
I mean, I was in favor of the sidewalk crosswalk at our last meeting, but, I can understand some of the complexities, but do need to move forward. And I think it's more important on the connection fees that we take care of the town there.
Yep.
And just simplify it, get rid of that.
I just, if I could, Sam, real quick, so that would be the amount of waiver, like for Lee, with the sidewalk, and then obviously 125,000. So based on these fees, we would be looking, at a $475,000 waiver package. With
Well,
getting.
how much are you trying to reduce this water and sewer?
Well, this is at 40%.
Oh.
40% and then 50% on these.
Yeah.
So
What do you-
the same that we started with.
Yeah.
But we're forgoing the sidewalk because this is a friendly 40B. B, we know, regardless, we need a sidewalk there. But I am confident with Alicia saying that we can find funding to do that in the sake of getting this project.
Yeah.
forward.
All right, I'll go along with that.
Strike all language of the sidewalk. Right?
Yeah, we'll just deal with the with the water and sewer rates. Now, how do you feel about the water and sewer rates? Dan said 40%. Jess?
Oh, I'm in support of that. And I think, I want this project. It's a great project. And I also don't want to hang an albatross around the residents.
Right.
So,
Okay. Ms. Kiefer?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate this full scope of discussion that we've had tonight, even though it seems like we're going in circles.
We are
and-
really.
we got rid of the sidewalk.
And well, I mean, to Paul's kind of comment, there's some truth to that in a perverse way, it's less impactful potentially for NOAA without a cost that it can't seek funding for, with the sidewalk issue. I would still ask the board to consider something slightly greater on the reduction of water and sewer in the range of 50%. And I'll put that out there. I'm not trying to be greedy because in a 100% affordable housing project, it's really not a matter of greed. It's just trying to make certain that the project can advance. So if you'll indulge me with just one last ask, I would increase the request for the sewer and water connection fee waiver up to 50%.
Could I ask Mr. Van Schalkwyk to,
Well, I guess I'd just go back to what I stated before is, looking at our current atmosphere, our current retained earnings and how much capacity we have and how much we're giving here. I wouldn't feel more comfortable than doing 40. And, part of our original proposal with the 40 was in hopes we'd be getting some of the sidewalk and now we're not. So that's my opinion is I would stick with 40.
Mike?
Dan's at 40. We've struck the sidewalk, which to Mr. Kranz's point earlier, look, this is a project that I do think we need. We left 125 on the table with that, in my opinion. So, yep, 40% is good by me.
John?
My biggest concern is how the residents of town feel about our water issues anyway. And I really don't want to change this 40%. I would be willing to discuss, I don't know, what else we got for options we can work on here for.
Well, the only other fee option is electrical, plumbing, gas at a 30% reduction, and we don't even know what that number is.
And I would just caution against changing that fee structure because, we know that 70% of that fee pays the inspector.
Right.
So I would, if we could keep that at the 70%, that would protect the town while still foregoing the 30%.
All right, thank you. Ron? I'm sorry, John, were you done?
What about the other fees on the spreadsheet that are more administrative type fees than, there's a lot of labor fees and everything else in what we're doing with the water. But a lot of the other stuff is, inspection fees and
So the only other fees that there are, the building permit fees.
Yeah, that's
Those
the
are,
only other fee, John.
so we can't do anything with those.
No, we put a cap on that, remember?
Okay. Well, that's where we're at right now, but we haven't really taken any vote on it, so.
No, we haven't. We're just,
Right, I mean, just trying to find a place where we can meet some common ground.
Ron? What do you think?
Fees as stated in the original spreadsheet.
Okay. So I would say pretty much no to the change in the reduction in fees, Ms. Kiefer.
I tried, Mr. Chairman.
All right. So we put that to bed. We got no sidewalk and you got no reduction in fees, so we're turning the page.
Everyone's
Well, no,
happy.
no. Wait.
I mean, what else can, I mean, it's about as simple as it gets, okay?
Wait, just for clarification, there is a reduction in fees. It's
There
not.
is.
Okay.
Correct.
Further reduction. Yeah, we're going after full fares on this. Okay, yeah, no.
Yeah, so my suggestion on the board action then is waiver granted for 40% of the applicable water and sewer fees.
Yes.
All right, we do actually still have to go back because we haven't covered 28 to 29 or 30 yet.
Let's do it. Get this. Come on, guys. Okay.
So 28 general bylaws, section 2.8.b9 stormwater and stormwater regulations. The applicant requests a waiver of using the BMP performance evaluation tool provided by the Environmental Protection Agency. The applicant does not request a waiver of substantive provisions of this regulation. I don't really know what the
What does that mean?
is of using the BMP performance evaluation tool.
Yeah, excuse me. This is Dan from the DPW. So that's one of our new regulations in our storm regs. And that's okay if we waive that in this case and not using that tool. They've substantially used the mass stormwater standards and DPW is fine with that.
Thank you.
So I would suggest waiver granted there.
All right.
Number 29, section 2.8.b10, stormwater bylaw and stormwater regulations. Requires stormwater system to have a 1 foot minimum of freeboard for storms up to the 100-year storm event. The applicant requests a waiver to allow 0.88 feet of freeboard in system 2. Do you have any feedback on that?
On the reduction? That was addressed, I believe, by the peer review that they were okay with that.
Yeah. This is Dan. That's fine too. We need that 0.12. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, that's fine. 0.88. And that's another real stringent requirement we have added in our new stormwater regs per our MS4 permit. So.
Okay. And then on number 30, we're talking about section 2.8B15. This section requires drainage swales to be designed to accommodate the 25-year storm event and velocities below 4 feet per second. The applicant requests a waiver of this requirement as applied to the drainage swale behind the phase 2 building, as the swale directs a minimal amount of water from a small area away from the building and into the infiltration system. Again, Dan, that you don't have a concern with that?
No, yeah, that's just a directional swale, just directing the water away. So, and I think that came up in the peer review as well as not being a concern. So
that is all of the waivers.
All right.
Is there anything we needed to go back and discuss?
John, there was something you wanted to discuss? Something
Yeah, I want to go back. I want to go back to 4 again.
4?
B1, sorry, where we talked about where this talks about the 25%, 27 units of the rental units shall be reserved. I don't know why that verbiage has to be in there. This is 100% affordable income housing.
Yes, and again, you cannot impose a requirement that requires more than 25% of the units to be affordable.
I think even
This
though
in there is to make sure you have the requirement that they meet the minimum standards for affordability under Chapter 40B. They have obviously proposed a project that exceeds those minimum standards, but you can't require that in your decision.
It's in the waivers, isn't it?
Yes.
We put it in the waivers, John.
If we go back to the language on the waiver on the building department fees,
Yes.
Waivers granted to allow building permit fees and certificate of occupancy fees to be a total of $217,000. The waiver is also granted for 30% of the plumbing, HVAC, and electrical fees. Such waiver is based upon the applicant's proposal that 100% of the units in the project be restricted as affordable. Any change to the affordability percentage shall require a modification of this comprehensive permit pursuant to 760 CMR 56.0511.
Okay, so we're guaranteed and
Yes.
it will always be 100%. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I can live with that. The other thing was the parking. I don't know where that
155.
is. What's that?
155. 155 spaces.
Yeah,
And
Well-
it was 1.48 or something, 1.44 instead of 1.5.
okay, my
household.
issue with parking is the community building being open to the public. I have issues all across the board with that open to the public statement. This commons is this is a unit. This is a place. It's not a gated community, but it's a community. And that should be for the residents only. I'm concerned about, number one, it becomes a hangout. Number two, they talk about use of the pool.
No,
When
the
Sandy
pool
Pond is down, they're gonna have so many people down there, there won't be parking available for the residents. I just don't see how, I mean, it may have been a good selling tool and say, oh yeah, we're gonna have this open to the public and all that. But there's just so many things that can go wrong with that. I'm really against that portion of it.
Which
I
condition are we talking
believe
about?
Hold on, one at a time. Jess,
I believe the pool was not to be open to the general public. That was said a while ago because of liability issues. So it wasn't the pool part that would be public, it was the rest of the community building. Just to
Well,
clarify.
I don't understand why it should be. I really don't. This is their community.
no, this is our
Which
community.
condition are we talking about?
I don't even think it's mentioned. I don't even think it's mentioned in the proposal, but it was mentioned in the presentation at the beginning that this would be open to the public. And I'm just strongly against that.
Carly,
I don't know if we have any say in that. But it just,
do.
I got to be honest. I don't foresee it being an issue. I mean, I've got that motel on Page Street behind me. There's a pool there. Anybody could swim in it. It's part of a complex. I haven't had any issues. The Zodiac had a pool at one point, and now it's, I don't know, like an overflow tank or something. But it never seemed to be a. Again, it could be, but I don't think it would be an issue.
Carly?
So my understanding of the pool in the common area was not that anyone off the street that doesn't live there could just go in and use the pool. That's certainly not the intent of the applicant. Stephanie, can you correct me if I'm wrong?
That's absolutely true.
When we're saying it's open to the public, I think that, you know, the community space, if someone were having a birthday party in the complex and they were an invited guest, they would get to go to the community room. Again, not people walking in off the street, just hanging out in the community room.
well, that's not open to the public. Those are invited guests. But it said it would be open to the public, and the public is the word I had a problem.
If I may, I do think any mention of the community space being used and open to the public was by way of if the town would like to hold a community meeting as opposed to holding it in the high school where the CPA or the town meeting was held, which is obviously a fantastic venue for something like that. If the town wanted to hold a small meeting, it has the authority and the ability to do so and to utilize the common facility there to hold a meeting. The pool, as been mentioned, is a liability for it to be open to the public. So nobody without a resident, resident sticker, key card, whatever, can use the pool. But should members of the community, the greater community, be inclined to hold some sort of community meeting or function, they are allowed to do so within the space. That being said, I do just want to reiterate that it is unlikely that people off the street will enter this complex and utilize this complex. There's an architectural concept called public and private spaces. The second you put anything into a recessed driveway and make it questionably public, people generally don't congregate there. It's sort of understood that you're not really allowed to enter this area. In Boston, there's a beautiful harbor walk that goes behind a hotel. It is completely and totally public to anyone to walk on this harbor walk. But because the hotel takes up so much of that area, no one walks around that corner. They will circumvent that part of the harbor walk, go completely around it, and continue the rest of the way. It is just a weird concept that if something is not outright public and advertised as such, people don't tend to venture that direction. I don't foresee it to be an issue. I hear your concerns. Again, the pool, completely private. But if the town and any of you would like to hold a meeting or host a meeting for the benefit of the greater Ayer community, you are allowed to do so within this complex.
Well, yeah, but that's a whole different thing than open to the public. That's a scheduled event and it's planned and all that. So I'm okay with all of that. It's just I didn't like the concept of, well, that's open to the public. That's like
Your concerns are
There's
heard.
nothing in the permit about it, John.
I know it's the way it was presented. That's all.
Yes,
I remember that. All right.
Your
Is there anything
concerns
else
are
you wanted
heard.
to look at?
I'm good.
All right. Mr. Harity, what do we do now?
Now I think you're at the point where you take a vote to close the hearing and then a vote on the project as whether or not to approve, consistent with the decision as prepared and discussed.
Oh,
Fair enough.
could I just ask one question?
No.
Because I did raise this in my comment letter and just Paul to get your thoughts of, and I don't want to hold this process up more than tonight anyways, but there's no recourse to trying to work towards protecting the open space in the back there.
That again, that has
Or
to
is
be
that
something
outside the scope of this permit?
that has to be something that, I know we talked about this before. It
Yeah.
has to be something that the applicant actually offers.
Okay,
So
okay, thank you.
we can ask the applicant.
Well, wasn't there going to be a meeting with the Conservation Commission beyond the scope of what we're doing? Some of the stuff was said, well,
Okay,
that's going to be as part of their approval process or something.
Under the State Wetlands Protection Act,
Yeah.
the applicant will be before the Conservation Commission. You're correct.
right. So I guess then we could raise it there. I'm just making
Yes,
sure it's not
Certainly.
part of
Yes.
this process. So I'm happy to move forward.
All those, I make a motion, we close the public hearing for the comprehensive permit of Neighborhood of Affordable Housing, Inc., 65 Fitchburg Road.
Amen.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. State your name.
Jessica Gino, aye.
Mike Gibbons,
John Ellis, aye.
Who I?
Did he say aye?
He did.
All
my
right.
God. Sam
He did.
Goodwin, aye. The
Oh,
public
come
hearing
on.
is closed. All right. Next item on the agenda, we need to take a vote on the decision on the application for the comprehensive permit. Mike, you want to make a motion?
I'd love to. Paul, would it be correct to say I make a motion to approve the comprehensive permit for 65 Fitchburg Road, Air Mass, as drafted and discussed?
Correct.
So moved.
With revisions as discussed at tonight's hearing.
Yep.
All right. I make a motion to approve the application for a comprehensive permit for Neighborhood of Affordable Housing, Inc., at 65 Fitchburg Road in Ayer, Mass, with the revisions made this evening and as discussed. Did
Second,
I cover it, Paul?
Very good. Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye. State your name.
Jessica Gino, aye.
Mike
Second.
Gibbons, aye.
Donald Lozay.
Rodney Philbin,
Thank you. Sam Goodwin, aye. All right, now, Paul, what happened?
Yes. Now I finish all of these changes and get this over to Carly within the next 15 minutes. And then the decision needs to be signed and then it can be filed with the town clerk's office.
Signed wet ink?
Board members.
Is it a wet ink signature?
Generally it would be, yes.
So would we come in tomorrow, Carly, and sign it individually?
Yep, you could do that. I do have a pre-existing doctor appointment at 10, so if you could come in after 12, that would be appreciated.
How's Friday feel?
I was going to say the same.
Yeah, Friday, best I can do is Friday. Late for, actually, what time you out of there Friday? Noon?
No, 2, but I don't ever leave till usually 3:30 or 4 anyway.
You really only need 3 signatures out of the 5.
If
All
we
right.
get 3 tomorrow, can we file it with the clerk then?
Yes.
So John, Ron and Jess, could you come in after 12 tomorrow?
Yes.
Sure, I come in.
And then could the other 2 remaining board members sign it on Friday? Or does it
Yes.
matter? at that
No,
point?
yeah, they do not all have to come in and sign at the same time. Yeah, if you wanted to have the other people come in on Friday and wait to file it with the town clerk until then, certainly could do that as well.
So it'd be filed with the town clerk at the latest by Friday. But I could do it tomorrow with 3 signatures.
Correct.
Gonna be late Friday when I get there, Carly.
I'd wait for you, Sam.
Thank you.
Oh.
Oh, oh. I'd like to
It's been a long
thank
night.
everybody for all of their work in this. Seriously, everyone has just, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm glad we got it done.
Good job, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Very
guys.
good job, Sam. Thank you, Paul. Thank you,
Thank you very
everyone.
much.
And
Thank
Thank
you,
you. to
everyone.
Chairman and members of the board.
and
Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure working
Thanks for
with all of
greasing
you.
our wheels,
Thank you.
Paul.
Thank you, Paul. I'd like to make a motion to close the meeting.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying good night.
Good night.
Good night.
good night.
Good night.
Good night, all.
Right on.